Welcome to Tales from SYL Ranch, the BitChute channel where everyone is entitled to my opinion. And I'm Bill Stone. While I have your attention, of course, I'd like to ask that if you like what I'm doing, please like this video, subscribe to my channel, hit the notification bell, share me on social media, and tell all of your friends, family, neighbors, pets, and livestock to do the same. I would appreciate your support via my PayPal tip jar, my Subscribe Star, my merch stores on Teespring, or a place on my website where you can support me further. And there are links to all of these on my description box. Well, Happy New Year, Happy New Decade from Tales from SYL Ranch, which, unlike any place else you're probably going to watch tonight, is based not in some major metropolitan area, but rather a small city of about 350,000, Lincoln, Nebraska, which is on the upper Great Plains of North America, as you can see through the windows behind me. It's really not that much different here in terms of having a New Year's Eve. I'm just going to sit here and I'm going to talk, and I'm going to take back and forth from my viewers, of course, about pretty much anything you want to talk about. My last live stream that was about Star Wars Rise of Skywalker was very, very screwed up. I never even got to the video because of the way that the new streaming works on YouTube. I didn't understand how to shut it off correctly and lost the whole damn video, which probably means that I may talk about Star Wars Rise of Skywalker tonight, just to reiterate what my position kind of is on it. And, of course, if you see anything weird looking going on, let me know. I obviously want to know if I'm 5x5 for everyone. Well, it's going to be a new year, a new decade. And you know what? About the decade part, I don't really care. It's a nice little demarcation point in terms of a decade. No doubt it will be something that defines a new generation. I don't know what they're going to call them. Millennials, post-millennials, Gen X, Gen Z, who the hell knows? But they'll no doubt come up with something to call them based on the fact that they were born 2020 or later. Myself, well, you know, next month I'm going to hit 55. I'll probably have a live stream for that, just for kicks. And you will, throughout this live stream, see me taking a drink from time to time, because I tend to get very, very parched. And you may also see me go to my emergency trailer so that I can run off to the bathroom and take care of all the pop that I'm going to be drinking. So right now, here in the Upper Great Plains in Central Time Zone, it is 9:03. That makes it about 10 o'clock on the Eastern Time Zone, which is going to be the first place that's going to hit New Year's Eve in North America, obviously. So I'm just going to be here. I'm just going to be here for hours. I'm going to be here at least for 3 hours until it hits New Year's Eve here in the Upper Great Plains of North America in Central Time. Might go as far as doing later. Depends if I start getting too tired, which is always a possibility. But I'm stuck here for 3 hours at least, so you're stuck with me. Things to talk about. Rise of Skywalker. Why the hell not start there? The Rise of Skywalker. Well, put it this way. Within about 2 hours after the world premiere of Star Wars Rise of Skywalker, a very, very good bootleg copy of that sucker appeared various interesting places on the internet. Now, I have to tell you the way I work on this. I'm on a very fixed income. I do not have the money to cost justify 15 different streaming sites just to get one or maybe two, TV shows that I actually care about. And in any case, what it tends to be something I actually care about, like, say, Star Trek Discovery, turns out to be crap and isn't worth paying dime one for. So I don't do that. I also don't do it with movies, especially science fiction. There is an old law, pardon me. You're going to hear from time to time. I haven't gone ahead and muted my phone because I have my children not here, sadly. They were on their way home from seeing their mother for Christmas, who lives in Chicagoland, which of course is not on the Upper Great Plains. And they stopped here briefly to have dinner with me, Proton Mailman. They stopped briefly to have dinner with me, and which was great. Love seeing them. I don't get anywhere near enough chances to see them, but they're driving back all night tonight from Lincoln. Well, they started out, astonishingly, they started out this morning, at my ex-wife's home in, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to silence this. Well, they started out from my ex-wife's home in Chicagoland. From there to Lincoln, Nebraska isn't driving about 8 hours. And they're continuing on to Colorado Springs, ultimately, which is another 10 hours. So they didn't spend a ton of time with me. We had dinner, and that was great. As I say, I don't get nearly enough chances to see them as I would like. Holidays and stuff, maybe, but, ordinarily, they're adults. They have their own lives, sadly. As a parent, it's something you get used to. You say to yourself, well, my kids went and grew up. They grew up a lot. They're, they're pushing 30 almost, which makes me just feel old as hell. Hey, Larry, glad you joined me tonight. As I mentioned, don't know what I'm going to talk about. I'm here for at least 3 hours, because it isn't until 3 hours from now that we get our New Year's Eve here in the Upper Great Plains in Central Time Zone. I'm just going to gibber on about anything I want to gibber on about, and Larry or anybody else who comes in, I'll respond to anything you say. But as I say, I'd get a chance to see my kids on their, my God, 18-hour drive from Chicagoland all the way down to Colorado Springs. So, hey, Proxenoid, anyone see my towel? Well, as usual, I have it over here. As always said, even in my politics shows, which I'll warn you, man, I got 3 hours at least. I might delve into politics. It's not my intent, but I might. But I always have both a towel and a jackalope somewhere in my pictures somewhere. Yes, Happy New Year 2020, not the beginning of the new decade. Yeah, you're right. Technically, it doesn't begin until 2021, but hey, who the hell knows? Great. Now I'm seeing. Okay, there it goes. Unfortunately, down here I have my YouTube control panel, and my last live stream, which was about Rise of Skywalker, got completely fracked over because I didn't understand the new way that they do on YouTube for doing live streams in terms of turning it off. I didn't know. And consequently, the damn thing got completely lost. I have nothing. Which is why I'm probably going to talk about Star Wars Episode 9, Rise of Skywalker, which is not one of my favorite films. None of the current trilogy is any of my favorite films. And I'll tell you something about this, right? I mean, George Lucas has said, that this is movies for 12-year-olds. I agree. I was 12 years old when I first saw Star Wars, the first one, currently called now A New Hope, but back then wasn't, just Star Wars. And I was 12 years old when I saw that, so I totally get it. You have to scratch your head just a little bit when you get to the prequel trilogy because, there's so much going on in terms of politics and stuff. Politics, simplistic politics for 12-year-olds? No, 12-year-olds want action, adventure, and so forth, and something at Maze. Yeah, Larry, Rise of Palpatine. Yeah, that's probably a better description for it. But as I was mentioning when I started out here, I don't subscribe to any streaming services because I'm on a limited income. I cannot cost justify like 10 different freaking services in order to get one or maybe two TV shows that I actually care about. Nor can I cost justify the $20 or so that it takes to go to a freaking movie these days. Oh man, you'll laugh, you'll cry, you'll kiss $20 goodbye, and I can't do that. I don't have the money. So I was lucky enough that within about, honest to God, 2 hours, 2 freaking hours after the world premiere of this film, a very good bootleg cam copy of it started picking up on the internet. Now, I'll tell you, I don't intend to rip them off. If I like a movie, I will go see it, even repeatedly. Some of the Marvel movies, I usually will watch what I call a screener, which is one of those bootlegs. And if I like the movie, I will go and see it. I will pay the money. Sometimes, if it's a good movie, I'll see it over and over again. The first 2009 Star Trek movie. It's generic action schlock, but it was an exciting film. It wasn't bad. I went to that one repeatedly. So, I'll pay if it's any good. But the problem is, most of it's crap. It is what Ted Sturgeon called the Sturgeon's Law in action, which is 90% of science fiction is crap. And there's a corollary to this. I don't know who came up with this one, but it's 90% of everything is crap. And that is almost certainly true with TV shows, with, movies in particular. I cannot just cost justify all of this crap when there is a 90% chance, and it's at least a 90% chance now, that I'm going to hate it. Why would you pay money to go see something that sucks? And here we come to Star Wars Episode 9, Rise of Palpatine. And again, I'm going to talk about it because my original live stream on that went completely to hell. I'm doing it completely off my head. I didn't bring up my script for it or anything. I'm just going to kind of tell my impressions and some of the stuff I got. Larry, so 90% of Sturgeon and Ted Sturgeon is crap. I honestly don't know enough about Sturgeon's work to know. I think generally what you can say is that, because there is a whole bunch of science fiction on Project Gutenberg. I invite you to go there. It is great because there's a whole lot of science fiction that ran in the pulps. 1940s, about maybe it depends, through about the 1960s that fell into the public domain. They were stories that appeared in the pulps. They were written by lesser authors, not people like Heinlein or Asimov or Sturgeon or people like that. Yeah, that's where you get into the 90% of science fiction is crap. It was the lesser-known authors. Sometimes they did some really good stuff, but I think, and I haven't done it because I don't have access to, to real pulps of any of those pulps. These are just individual, like, short stories and novellas. I think what that really means is 90% of the authors are crap. Because, you get something from Heinlein, for example, or H. Beam Piper, another author I really like. And their stuff is good. Their stuff is just generally really good. Occasionally they have a dud, but their stuff is generally really good. It's when you get to these lesser known guys that were, filling the pages around them, not so good sometimes. I mean, sometimes they have some good ones, but 90% of it is crap. But do go out to Project Gutenberg. Search on science fiction. You'll see all the classics, of course. Excuse me. The complete works of Edgar Rice Burroughs is on there. That would include all of the Tarzan novels. I don't even know how many Tarzan novels there are. There's got to be in the 50s or so. There's his Barsoom series, which is about Mars. There is a Venus series. There is Pellucidar. There is, a world under the Earth, inside the Earth's core. All of that is for free on Project Gutenberg. Frankenstein, of course, Dracula, all of the works of H.G. Wells, so the Time Machine and all of that stuff is all in public domain. Larry says Buck Rogers stories are in the public domain. Yes, you can find the original Buck Rogers, and it wasn't Buck Rogers at the time. It was Armageddon 2419, I think, is the first novel that included the character who would become Buck Rogers in the comic strips. And then there's another one, a sequel to that, The Air Lords of Han, which is also, it features the character who would have become Buck Rogers. these two characters are nothing like each other. They share some very basic concepts, and story ideas, but they didn't call him Buck Rogers in those novellas. They're actually two novellas. Usually, if you buy them, if you don't know that they're on Project Gutenberg for free, if you buy them, you'll find that they're always together because they're novellas, so you stick them together to get a novel-sized work. But yes, Larry, those are in the public domain. Use of that character is a little different. As with most stories that are in the public domain, and there's, believe it or not, there's some of like the Fleischer Superman cartoons, which are great, by the way. If you've never seen the Fleischer Superman cartoons, oh God, you need to see the Fleischer Superman cartoons. Go to YouTube, just look for Fleischer Superman cartoons, and you will find all of them. They are awesome. The animation in them is astounding. They spent a lot of money on that animation. And they're really good. They're just really, really good. Stories made for children, obviously, but still really good animation, stuff that you will not see even in modern animation today. They animated the characters so well. Like Superman. There's one shot that I will always remember. Superman, from some reason or other, is blown onto the edge of a building. And the way that he uses his body to push off from the building, rather than just sort of floating away, he has to use his legs to push off of the building to get into the air. You don't see that kind of detail. And there's some really iconic moments as well. Superman is always associated with going into a phone booth to change his clothes. He didn't really do that in the comics. He did that in the Fleischer cartoons. That's where we get that, is from the Fleischer cartoons. Warner Brothers Videos has put those Fleischer cartoons on Superman live action film DVDs. Oh, that's cool. They are still in the public domain. And you can't use Superman in any context. You can make Superman stories because of this, but not in any context other than just those public domain stuff. You can't take anything from anything else. It has to be from those. And somebody actually did a sequel to one of those stories called The Mechanical Monsters. Great story. One of the things those early people got about Superman is that Superman is actually a science fictional character. He works best when he's got science fictional foes to fight. He has to have something that at least looks like it could possibly threaten him. Muggers, forget it. But when Lex Luthor is a mad scientist who is doing creating all kinds of these big science fictional things in order for, to bring himself up to Superman's power level eventually, hopefully. It's more compelling because Superman actually has a chance, potentially at least, of losing. Most of Superman's foes and most foes inside of comic books, Superman can take care of in about 5 minutes if he wants to. So like the Mechanical Monsters is great. It features, giant robots who are stealing things. This was also back in a time when Superman wasn't so fantastically overpowered. He could be hurt a little more easily. He couldn't just, use his super breath and suddenly, clear the way down an entire city street. Superman also works best when he's not incredibly overpowered. But somebody, and I don't remember whom, did a comic strip that was a sequel to The Mechanical Monsters. But watch any of those things. They are really well animated. Fleischer Studios, who did Popeye, for example. Also, they did Gulliver's Travels. But they were given a ton of money. In fact, they didn't even want to do those cartoons. So they put a giant price tag on it. But the idea of this selling, because it was Superman when he was really popular, was so good that they said, oh, okay, here's all the money you need. And so the Fleischer brothers then had to kind of sit down and go, oh, crap. Now we have to actually make these things. And they did a fantastic job. They don't, for example, spend half the movie going through an origin story. I mean, who needs an origin story of like Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman? Spider-Man, these iconic characters. If you don't know their their origin stories, you've been living under a really deep rock in a very deep cave for the last 80 or so years. Everybody in the world knows this stuff, unless you're, starving somewhere in Africa and don't have access to any of this. Anybody in the civilized world knows this stuff. You know, for future Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, Spider-Man, iconic characters, they do not need any origin stories the next inevitable time that they're rebooted, or as I prefer to call it, just plain remade. Larry, supervillains threatening humanity. Big stuff. Not muggers, not, your average run-of-the-mill criminals. Somebody who is big enough to be a giant threat. And that's how Superman works well. Yes, it was Max and Dave Fleischer, Larry, who did those animations. Yeah, they did a lot of great animation. They were one of the first people who did things like rotoscoping, which is where you take a live human being, or object or something like that, and you film them doing something, and then you essentially trace over them to get a very, very, very accurate depiction of what somebody does in terms of movement and stuff like that. So they did a lot of that. They did Popeye, they did Betty Boop, they did a number of other characters, but those Superman cartoons are amazing, and they steal moments of it. In Superman Returns, there's a scene, one of the big ones, I'm not a fan of Superman Returns because Superman's a weird super stalker. But there's a scene in there where he catches a plane, right? That scene is stolen wholesale out of one of the cartoons, which is, today it's a racist name, but at the time, of course, it was World War II. And everybody referred to them this way, but it was called. It was one of those cartoons called The Japateurs. If you watch it, be aware again. World War II, everybody was propagandizing against Japanese and the Germans, and the Japanese in these are incredibly stereotypical and utterly racist from today's perspective. They're all short. They all have really beady eyes. They all wear glasses, and they're all just plain evil and anti-American. And oh yes, are we going to bucked teeth isn't it's like watching that Japanese guy on Gilligan's Island who'd been there for like 30 years or 20 years or something after the oh yes, we're going to do that. You got to keep in mind, it was World War II. Everybody was doing that. It was the general attitude, and but it's still a great cartoon. It's awesome to watch Superman catch a giant plane. Stole it wholesale for Superman Returns. So, people who've watched some other videos of mine know I'm a big fan of Superman, always have been, kind of identify with him on a number of levels. Talked about that in a video where I did a review a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. I did a review of Superman in the 1978 version. Interesting thing, I have not always been watching the CW's Arrowverse stuff. I have not generally been watching it. I'm no longer the target demographic for it, and I get that. I totally get it. The target demographic for that, as always with every target demographic, is generally males 18 to 24 years old. And that's because they have a lot of spending cash. So that's why they like to aim it at them. And males 18 to 24 years old, and to some extent females, they're worried about things like relationships. I was at that age. I totally get it. Now, a marriage and a divorce later, and not particularly looking. I'm open to it if some foolish woman wants to have me. But I don't care that much about relationship stuff. For me, if I got in another relationship, it's going to be something that is with experience and a little more adult, But the problem with those CW ones for me is, there they are. they'll be in the middle of some great action, and then all of a sudden the whole thing comes to a screeching halt while they do some relationship work, between a guy and a woman. And I just like, oh, fortunately, again, I don't really watch these things. I don't watch this stuff even on as they're airing, because I can't stand commercials. But for me, it's like, oh God, not again. The best you can do for me is just skip over all that part to get back to the action. But I have been watching the Crisis on Infinite Earths series. Yeah. What I'm worried about right now is what happens to Brandon Routh's Superman. They have made clear that this Superman is the same Superman as the Christopher Reeve era. My Superman. Now, I like Brandon Routh as Superman. I have always liked him as Superman. Didn't like, Return of Superman, Superman Returns, because that was, Bryan Singer. I don't know what to attribute this to. Maybe it's because he's gay. He could not write that love story with Lois and Superman and all the associated crap in any way that was believable. Just came off as super stalker, and I didn't like that. But now we have Brandon Routh playing the Christopher Reeve era Superman that I always love and identify with from 1978. And I guess I won't spoil it if you haven't been watching it, but a thing happened to him at the end of the cliffhanger episode for Crisis on Infinite Earths. You have to understand, too, that I read Crisis on Infinite Earths as it was coming out in 1984 or 5, I've forgotten. And it was one of the first really big company crossovers where every single book in DC's line was involved in some way, even if they didn't have their own, story that directly contributed to the major story of the Crisis. They'd have some kind of offshoot, some kind of offshoot story where they did that. Larry says people are telling for the Snyder Cut of Man of Steel. I hate Man of Steel. I really hate it. They screwed up Superman in every way possible, in my opinion. Superman is a bright adventure character. You do not turn his costume into muted colors like Batman. You just don't. The way that they graded that, and there's somebody on YouTube, what if Superman was in color? What if Man of Steel was in color? And they've regraded some of the scenes. Well, it turns out that, in fact, on the set, they had a bright-colored Superman. And when he's flying around and doing stuff, it's bright. That's the way Superman should be, bright. He is not Batman. It is not Batman. The good thing about when you get Batman and Superman together is the contrast. It's the contrast between the dark, kind of tortured guy and this brighter guy who has a much more optimistic outlook on life. That's when it works. When you do Justice League, for example, another really crappy movie. Part of the reason Justice League works, when they do it right, is two things. It's the contrast between all these characters. You have Superman, who is, very bright kind of, adventure character, and then you have somebody like the Batman, who is, dark and brooding, and, he's a guy that deals more with muggers and stuff like that. That's his shtick. And then you have the Flash, and the Flash has been portrayed a number of different ways in comics and, in animation over the years. I think the best depiction of him was the Flash from the DC animated universe of the early 2000s. That's a guy, who's got a sense of humor. He's kind of the soul of the Justice League. Put all those together with different kinds of, attitudes and the way that they think and the way that they operate, and you stick all those people together, and it's the contrast that works. You can't make them all dark. You've got to have some individual. Wonder Woman. Let me mansplain something to you, Lucy, about Wonder Woman. When she was first created in the 1940s, 1941 was her first issue. When Wonder Woman was first created in 1941, She was not a demigod. She was not some kind of incredible warrior. She was more a goddess of love. Now, the guy that did her, forgotten his name now, but the creator of Wonder Woman, and by the way, his wife and a third woman, who they were in a polyamorous relationship in 1941. Not too many people knew about it, but boy, was that weird. In 1941, they would have been like, you're doing what? You got probably lesbian stuff going on. You're screwing two women. It would have been a giant problem if it had been found out. But because of his various, attitudes, Wonder Woman in the 1940s was somebody who was more a goddess of love. She came to man's world, not during a war, not because she wanted to fight the war and kill and, bring out her sword and, just be a goddess of constant action and some death. She was more a goddess of love. And so I think one of the problems that they've done ever since then is slowly turning it. Yeah, that's it, Larry Moulton was his name. Moulton something. He actually did it under a pseudonym. He was a psychologist who had invented the lie detector, the polygraph. But I think they made a mistake over the years when they turned that character basically into a little bit more violent Superman. I don't think that is the right tone for Wonder Woman. I think it gets it a little better in the recent movies, but not much. She's still running around and crashing into everything and being sort of, this goddess of breaking things. That was not what she was in the 1940s. Now, also in the 1940s. And Larry, as he mentioned there, it's wrong, the Snyder Cut of the Justice League movie. I don't think it matters. I don't think it matters at all. I'm not even sure there is a Snyder Cut. I mean, so much of it, even if you put back the footage that he actually shot, you're still going to wind up with a lot of footage that Joss Whedon did. And I find it difficult to believe that it would be any damn good. Snyder, Batman's fine, but not Superman, not those other characters. That version of the Flash is stupid. That's just stupid. And the best way the Flash has ever been portrayed is when he has a sense of humor, when he's very light. One of the best episodes of Justice League Unlimited had the Flash and Green Lantern and one of the new gods, I think Orion. They were going to appear. They were holding some kind of celebration for the opening of a Flash museum, and they wanted Wally West, the Flash, wanted to have some of these other heroes come down just to show up because he thought it'd be cool, and so he got Batman and it was Batman and Orion to show up. Well, he's got a couple of characters in his villains gallery who are some of them are real dangerous, and some of them are just kind of psychotic. And one of them, I think it was the Trickster, who was voiced by Mark Hamill, that I believe he was voiced by him. Well, he committed some crime, and Flash found him in some bar. And, Batman and Orion are just ready to take this guy down. And Wally just sits down next to him at the bar, and he says, "Dude, you're off your meds again, aren't you?" "Okay, well, I'm going to take you in. You're going to have to take your meds." And he's like, "Okay, Flash, we're cool about that." That is the difference between the Flash and everybody else. He doesn't just, and it was something that, the other characters, the other Justice Leaguers went, "Oh, okay, I get it. He's a hero, partly because he can take down the really bad guys if he needs to. But on the other hand, if he's got somebody who's, criminal because they're off their meds for a while, he can sit down, talk to them rationally, and just convince them otherwise." That is the way to do the Flash. Larry says Snyder has tweeted pics of the film canisters of his cut of JLA. I don't know. Maybe it's better. Who the hell knows? It's hard to imagine. They just fracked up those characters. The Flash in there. Superman's a little better than he was in Man of Steel, but not a hell of a lot. Batman's okay in there. I don't mind Ben Affleck as Batman. I hated him in Batman v Superman. That was a terrible movie, and it was terrible because it was trying to take a comic book that deconstructed superheroes and make it Superman's second film. That's stupid. You can't deconstruct superheroes. You just can't. It works. It worked in the 1980s for like Watchmen. That was brilliant. Deconstructing superheroes in Watchmen was brilliant. But on the whole, you can't deconstruct your superheroes because then you're left with questions like, hey, wait a minute. There is no fracking way that a pair of eyeglasses is going to hide Superman's identity. That's your starting point for superheroes, is a guy who wears eyeglasses to hide his identity. You can't deconstruct that. If you deconstruct it, you wind up with something that just doesn't work. And Dark Knight Returns, which is really what a lot of Batman v Superman is based on, is a deconstruction of Batman. You and Superman to some extent. You can't do that. It's stupid. You have to put these characters into a universe where Clark Kent or Superman is an incredible actor. He has to be so good that he can put on a pair of eyeglasses and be, mousy and still have it work, so that people don't immediately just go, hey, wait a minute, you're Superman. You have to put it into a universe where this stuff will actually work. And, Batman v Superman, it's dark. Superman Returns, it's dark. Not Superman Returns, but Man of Steel, dark. And certainly you didn't need that extended frickin' origin story. Everybody knows what happens with Superman. They handled it perfectly in the Fleischer comics, and the Fleischer cartoons. They show you Krypton. They say deep out in space was this planet that had evolved a race of supermen. And one day, the planet was going to explode, and a scientist sent his son to Earth. The kid grew up on Earth with amazing powers, faster than a speeding bullet, more powerful than a locomotive, able to leap tall buildings in a single bound. And that's all you need. You don't need anything else for a Superman origin. If you're going to do it, 1978 Superman did it right, and you should never do it again because you will never top that. Flash had Gorilla Grodd as one of the villains. Yeah, Gorilla Grodd was one of Flash's actual threat villains. Somebody who could really cause problems. Excuse me, when I put my glasses on, I had a giant smudge across it and I couldn't see it. It's possible I may need to put them on again. But yeah, he's one of his actual threat villains. But, he's got a number of them like that. But then there are people who are just like, more like wannabes who are off their meds, and they don't need to be taken down. They just need to be talked to, And yes, Chris Reeve changed his voice as Clark Kent. Yes, that's one of the things that has always worked well with Clark Kent. It was something that started in the radio series, and that's why Bud Collyer, who was the voice of Superman from the early radio series in, I think, the late 1930s, and then he was the voice of Superman all the way through at least the 1960s. And he always did the same thing. Clark Kent had a higher pitched voice, and he was, gee, Chief, don't you think that's kind of a dangerous mission? And then when it came to the action, he'd say, this looks like a job for Superman. And so, he changed his voice, and Chris Reeve did the same thing. The one that really strikes me all the time with Chris Reeve, he changed his smile. I do not have Chris Reeve's natural smile. Very few people have Chris Reeve's natural smile. It is magnetic. It makes you look at the guy and he's smiling and you just love him. Superman has that smile. Chris Reeve did not use that smile with Clark Kent. It's much geekier looking. And as I say, Chris Reeve's entire attitude towards it, right, was, at the time they were saying, let's bring Superman into a more realistic setting. As realistic as you can get, in that kind of a universe. And so he said to himself, in order for Lois Lane to not instantly figure out that Superman and Clark Kent are the same person, Clark Kent had to be a really good actor. And so he was playing a character as Clark Kent. The Superman was his real thing, but Clark Kent was a character he played, and he played it really well. I was always surprised why Chris Reeve didn't get some kind of really good recognition for that. But anyway, I guess I'd be interested to see the Zack Snyder cut. It's just that until they made Wonder Woman and Aquaman and Captain Marvel, I'm sorry, I refuse to think of that character as Shazam. Shazam is the wizard who gave Captain Marvel his powers. Now, I understand they can't use the name Captain Marvel because they went and let it drop out of copyright, and then Marvel did it, so they have to use something else. But I can only think of that character as Captain Marvel. That is Captain Marvel to me. And so until they started doing those movies and getting the freaking tone right, I hate Man of Steel, hate Dark Knight. I said Dark Knight Returns. Batman v Superman. I found Justice League boring and predictable. Just boring and predictable. That was a movie I did not pay for. That was a movie that I have watched once or twice, only once or twice, via other means. These days, I used to use BitTorrent. Excuse me, BitTorrent. Excuse me. But I used to use those sorts of means, and now, good God, everything is right there online for streaming. You want to know a secret? You want to know how you find all of those shows that you want to watch without having to shell out half of your fracking income to 15 different streaming services? It's really simple. I'm amazed that nobody knows. Here's what you do. You go to DuckDuckGo.com, because Google sucks. You go to DuckDuckGo.com, and you enter in the words watch, and then whatever you want to watch, in quotes, and then online, and then free. That's all. It will return an enormous number of sites that are not having the episodes there, or shows there, or movies there themselves. They are index sites. Now, you must always have really aggressive ad blockers doing that, because some of these sites will have pop-ups that'll drive you nuts and do things to your computer. But that's all it takes. I'm amazed that nobody has figured this out. Watch, in quotes, whatever you want to watch, online, free. 3 simple words will get you what? Watch, online, free. And you may have to go through a few of them until you actually find one that's got some of them on it. But I spent some of the day today binging Boston Legal, because I've never seen the show all the way through. I've seen some episodes, but I started binging it today. Watch Boston Legal online, free. A bajillion sites. That's all you have to do. 3 words. I'm amazed that nobody even thinks to try it. It's easy. It's simple. Do that if you want to watch this without paying it through the nose for 15 different streaming services. Larry says, Marvel Comics was a different name way back when. Yeah, I've forgotten where they started out. They went through a number of different names. Atlas in the 1950s, I think. The name Marvel didn't really start as a company until the Silver Age in the 1960s-ish. Late 1950s, early 1960s. But yeah, they had a lot of different names. So did DC, actually. DC was actually, what became DC was a number of different companies. National Comics, All-American Comics, several different comic companies, but they somehow fell under the same umbrella so that when it came to the very first super team, the Justice Society, they could put these characters together. Interesting thing about the Justice Society was the way that they decided on the membership for the Justice Society. If a character had their own titular comic book, yeah, they might be a member of the JSA, but they wouldn't show up. They never showed up for meetings. Superman and Batman, for example, honorary members of the JSA who showed up about twice in the comics of those eras because they had their own titles. In fact, they both had 2 titles devoted to them. So they would get characters like, for a while, Green Lantern, the Golden Age Green Lantern, did not have his own title. And so he would show up in the JSA. But the moment he got his own title, he was gone. They would take these essentially backup characters, and they were the ones who were members of the JSA. That's how they decided on the membership back then. Yep, Larry, Marvel era is 1961 when the Fantastic Four started. Yep, that's about when things started as Marvel Comics. But because they were essentially an amalgamation of a number of different companies ever since the Golden Age, they still had characters like Namor, the Submariner, Captain America, the Red Skull, all of those 1940s era characters were still there. But I've been watching, getting way back to what I was starting about, I've been watching Batwoman to some extent. Oh, God, I hate that show. And it's not because I have a problem with a female bat. It's that I have a problem with the way that she's written. She's got this psychotic sister that she has now had either in custody or could have captured so many times. And she lets her go. And then she goes out and kills people. You know, that's stupid. You know, Batman would never do that. You know, Batman would never say, well, we're going to let you go this time, and you show me that you won't kill somebody for 24 hours, and we'll see about, me not picking you up. And no, God, that character's been in there so many times that you can't say anything except that she's accessory to murder multiple times over. So I've been watching that. I have not watched Supergirl for a while, again, because we had this relationship stuff. For me, not the target market. I get it, And I don't like the fact, honestly, I don't like the fact that she got pants. Just don't like it. I think it's like Superman in his trunks. I'm sorry. Superman has trunks. Without it, he looks weird. Supergirl has a skirt. Without it, she looks weird. I'm sorry. That's just the way it is as far as I'm concerned. But so I haven't been really watching Supergirl very much. I haven't been watching The Flash for a while. I watched the first couple of seasons pretty religiously, and after that became just, God, so much relationship stuff that I really haven't watched a lot of it. But I have been watching Crisis on Infinite Earths. And again, I'm somebody old enough that I was in my very early 20s, I think. 19 or 20, I've forgotten exactly when Crisis on Infinite Earths as a comic book was out. They have a problem. They have a serious problem because A, it's TV, and so you can't show tons and tons of heroes. B, they don't have tons and tons of heroes in that Arrowverse. The Crisis on Infinite Earths, there are panels that you look at that have 50, 60, 70 superheroes from all over the alternate Earths that they had back then in one giant 2-page panel. Well, clearly we can't do that. They don't have that many characters. Larry says CW shows are super shows are written by soap opera writers. Yeah, and it feels like it too, which is why I've not watched a lot of it. But I have been watching Crisis on Infinite Earths. My feelings on that are, let me see, what was the first one? First one was in a Supergirl episode. It wasn't really about Supergirl. The second one was a Batwoman episode, and that one there were interesting parts of, because I think that was the one where they picked up the 1978 era Superman played by Brandon Routh, and they did a really cool thing, I thought. They got Kevin Conroy, who is iconically now by multiple generations. He is recognized as the voice of the Batman because of all the work that he did for the DCEU. He still does it today. They still hire him today for various animated projects. His voice is so well known. But then they took him and they made him into a nut job. I think putting Kevin Conroy in there as Bruce Wayne was cool. I wanted to see more of that, except he was a nut job. He was a nut job that was... He was killed by Batwoman. And Supergirl, who's standing there with Batwoman. She stops Batwoman from going to him and trying to save him. He's getting electrocuted. Obviously, it would kill Batwoman. Supergirl's faster than a speeding bullet. She's more powerful than this electricity stuff. She could have just zipped over there and grabbed the guy before he even had a chance to hit this big old transformer and you get killed. Stupid. Faster than a speeding bullet, man. She could have saved the guy. And they had to kill him because they wanted to make Batwoman. Yeah, they had Batwoman kill him. Yuck. Yeah, she kicked him. He fell back into some kind of transformer that Supergirl could have saved him from. She could have seen that kick and seen that he was headed for that thing, swooped around behind him, grabbed him, and stopped him before he even hit the thing. It's just stupid. Just stupid. I didn't mind when they found the Brandon Routh 1978 era Superman. That's another one where they were stealing from another book that was, to some extent, deconstructing superheroes. It was a book where Superman had, Kingdom Come was what they were stealing that from. And that was a book where Superman and everybody he knew had been killed by the Joker, and Superman just gave up. He went to live at the Fortress of Solitude, and nobody ever saw him much again. They had to convince him to essentially come out of retirement. I am not happy that the love story between Superman and Lois Lane was chopped like that. I understand that it's not like they're going to get, somebody like Margot Kidder back to play him. But the fact is, Margot Kidder and Chris Reeve had an enormous amount of chemistry. Their love story, which is another thing Superman needs, is a love story with Lois Lane. It is a love story. It's a love story at first sight. So I'm not thrilled that they killed her off. And killed off all those people the same way that they did in Kingdom Come. It was just a different book. You didn't have to steal from that one. You could have a Lois Lane on that Earth that Superman has to leave behind. But that's the thing. I have two minds of talking about the original Crisis on Infinite Earths because it's A, far more complex than what they're showing, and B, so far, with a couple of exceptions, because I've read the original and did way back when, it's been predictable. Between that and, oh God, the same thing in those shows. Crisis on Infinite Earths should be solely about this gigantic threat that they have. There is no room in there, really, for putting the brakes to have relationship talks. If you're going to have any relationship talks, it should be how these characters are interacting with each other, not how they're interacting with characters that are on their own show. You just say, okay, that stuff's going to go on hold. We're going to make a big adventure thing, and that's all. But just like the regular stuff, the CW stuff. Okay, we're into something. Okay, Flash is running around, and it's just cool special effects, and doing some stuff with Reverse Flash or somebody else in it. Let's go talk to Iris for a while. God, shouldn't happen. Shouldn't happen in Crisis on Infinite Earths. Yeah, Superman had the black and red S logo. Again, that was something that was picked up from the Kingdom Come series. And again, you're talking about a Superman who basically gave up. He basically just gave up in that book. And so, black and red is okay. I wouldn't have done it for this Superman. I really wouldn't have. Yellow and red still works for this Superman. And not to spoil it necessarily, but in the last episode, which was a Flash episode, technically, something happens to that character that I'm pretty sure is going to be reversed, because I know the original story from which is the source material. I sure hope it's reversed. If that's the way that my Superman goes out, I'm going to be very upset. I'm already not thrilled that they killed off Lois Lane the way that it happened in the Kingdom Come comic. I'm not thrilled about that to begin with. But if they don't, and see, that's the other thing. Let me just tell you. Here's the end of Crisis on Infinite Earths in the comics. There's a giant boss battle that will have to happen in this one. And at the end of it, the Anti-Monitor is still a threat. Not a giant threat the way that he is. Most of what he's done has been resolved. But the Golden Age Superman, which is what they picked up instead of the one from Kingdom Come. It was the Golden Age Superman. And at that point, the Silver Age Superman decided that they were going to have to get into a thing where they had to get this guy. And the Golden Age Superman just goes after him with a gigantic, horrific, huge punch that destroys him, that essentially destroys the threat. And then they take that Superman and the Golden Age Lois Lane, who was still alive, and they go off into a limbo sort of thing until the modern age writers got a hold of it and screwed it all up with another Crisis thing where the Golden Age Superman was damn near a supervillain. This guy's at DC. You are so stupid. You are so stupid with your comics, especially with Superman. I know this character. I've lived some of this character's life. I have experience with being on a rural area for a long period of time, just like you see in the 1978 Superman. I have experience with having gone to Chicagoland for about 10 years. I get this character. Call me, you frickin' doofuses. You're screwing it up left and right, and you're having to reboot your universe every couple of years now. Rebooting the universe, oops, I don't think anybody is going to be surprised that at the ultimate end of Crisis on Infinite Earths, they're going to reboot everything so that it's not reboot it, but they're going to merge it all into a single universe. Partly because they've gotten into some of the same problems that they sort of had with the comics of the era of Crisis on Infinite Earths. But they're going to merge it all into one universe. And so, some Superman's going to have to stay, and it's not going to be the Brandon Routh Superman. My assumption is that we're ultimately going to get a scene similar to what happened in the comics. If they take him out that way, that's fine. And I think those guys are smart enough to never bring him back. I would be okay with my Superman going out that way. Yeah, Larry says, stakes. Most stories today have no stakes. Yeah, here you have Crisis on Infinite Earths. The biggest stakes ever. You're talking about multiple entire universes, everything being totally destroyed. Infinite number of lives, literally infinite number of lives snuffed out. That is a huge, huge, huge stake. On TV, it needs to be more epic. It should have been more epic. I like some of the stuff they do. I mean, they made a totally different twist on the Flash in this one. I have to admit, having been around in the 1990s, I don't want to spoil it for you, I guess, but one of the neat things about that I did like when I was watching Flash was that they had these alternate universes, and John Wesley Snipes, Flash from 1990-ish, I think, made appearances, and I didn't mind what happened with him. I thought that was pretty well done. It's not the way that it happened in the comics at all, but I thought that was nicely well done. I don't want to see that happen to Brandon Routh's My Superman. I don't. Brandon Routh is a good enough guy to have replaced Christopher Reeve. Nobody ever is going to play Superman as well, as nuanced, and as just well done as Christopher Reeve, directed by Richard Donner. Nobody is ever going to top that. Not ever. It will never happen. But as a sort of replacement for him, I didn't mind Brandon Routh in Superman Returns. I thought that, he was going to get us close. He came with the same thing. Superman has to be a good actor. Otherwise, Lois is going to instantly figure out who he is. As opposed to occasionally just looking over and going, well, he looks a lot like... And then he'll give her some goofy smile and wave and go, no, he's not Superman. Larry says, saw the 1990s Flash actor. Also, Larry, Mary Linda Carter could have been a Wonder Woman cameo. Believe it or not, they have some comics that are in continuity with the Arrowverse Crisis on Infinite Earths. One of the characters in there is, in fact, the Linda Carter Wonder Woman. Yeah, absolutely. I think maybe, I haven't read them all, but I think maybe the comics, because it's comics and you're not limited by budget in terms of what you can show, and the writers are not trying to write soap operas, they can throw in a few more characters from a few more universes. I would have liked to have seen, I get it, if you were going to use Linda Carter, she's still a fantastically beautiful woman today. But that costume, if you ever watched Linda Carter as Wonder Woman in the Wonder Woman costume, the question at the time that I always asked, and I was at an age when I was like, wow, isn't that freaking hot? You always asked yourself, how does that costume stay on? She's running around in this, and, Linda Carter's a very voluptuous woman. She's running around in this, and you just go, did they glue that thing down from the inside? Did they crazy glue it to her? How does that costume stay on? But it would have been nice. It would have been kind of cool if she'd been on there. But I get it. She's older. You'd probably have to spend a lot of money de-aging her, because in every incarnation, regardless of what it is, well, Golden Age Wonder Woman did age some slowly. But generally, she's been portrayed as, as an immortal Amazon, someone who doesn't age. So you would have to do some kind of de-aging on her that they probably didn't have the money for. You'd have to pay her, and I don't know how much she'd cost at this point. And then there's the costume. She's a beautiful woman today. But obviously, when you get into your, 70s, even though she's a beautiful woman at age 70 or so, I don't know how old she is. Even though she's a really beautiful woman, you're like, I'm not sure that costume's going to stay on anymore. Things happen to your body, trust me. There are things that I used to wear 30 years ago that I can never wear again today, because stuff just happens as you get older, even if you're, working at it like she clearly does. Yes, Larry, Linda Carter was hot and still is. Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. She was and is a very, very beautiful woman. Even at her age now, as a, nearly 14 days away at midnight, from being a 55-year-old man. Even now I can look at her and go, wow, there's a woman who has aged fantastically well and does not appear to have had any work done. You can usually tell when women have had work done. You get the fish eyes, you get stretched out looking skin that doesn't even look normal. I understand them wanting to continue to look good, but to be employable, because sadly that's something that Hollywood's going to require. Hollywood does not hire ugly women. Period. End of story. Unless it is an absolute story point. And even then, they hire the hot girl who doesn't know she's hot. But they don't hire ugly women. They hire women who are beautiful. So I understand it, particularly as women age in Hollywood. Because for women, age is death. Most of the time, if you're an ingenue and you age, you're done. You never work again. So I understand them wanting to do it. But it always just looks so fake and phony and stupid, I have to respect Marina Sirtis, who played Deanna Troi in Star Trek The Next Generation, a little bit, because she had a breast job done and hated it. Hated the results. It was painful for her. She didn't like it. It caused her pain in her everyday life. I think more women should look to her and say, maybe it ain't worth it. Maybe it's just not worth it. Maybe I should just try to age as gracefully as I possibly can. Larry says, I think Gal Gadot is pretty, but a little too skinny to be an Amazon. Yeah, that's just a general problem with actors and actresses today. Mostly actresses. The camera adds 10 pounds. And where Marilyn Monroe was an extraordinarily voluptuous woman, she couldn't get hired today. She's not thin as a rail. That's one of the problems with Batwoman, Ruby Rose's Batwoman. If you look at pictures of her, she's anorexic. I'm sorry. Ruby Rose is an anorexic person. She is not even remotely intimidating as a Bat character. Not even remotely. And intimidation is an integral part of that character. That's one of the things the DCEU got right. The animated universe, rather, got right. When Batman goes to question someone, one of the best scenes out of that series that I remember, where Batman was just utterly intimidating. There was something going on with a country called Kaznia in Justice League Unlimited. And there's this Kaznian crook who's been trying to rip off something for some big... It was going to be a big threat against the entire world. Somebody was trying to take over the world. And he was stealing stuff. And he was speaking in his native language. And the subtitles were, you can't understand me, and I wouldn't even talk to you if you did. And Kevin Conroy goes, in that language, I do understand you, and yes, you will. And that's all you needed. Just that level of intimidation. And Ruby Rose is not intimidating in the slightest. No intimidation. And that's just a big deal. You got to be intimidating as a Bat. But yeah, you're right about that. It's just a problem with modern actresses. They've gotten to the point where they're emulating, actresses are emulating the women who are in the rail thin supermodel category, and they're not. When you're playing something like a superhero like Wonder Woman, if you're going to do that, you got to be a little bigger. If you're going to be playing Batwoman, you can't be 5'7" and 97 pounds, which is about what Ruby Rose is. I've said it. I said it once in a video before. Ruby Rose. I really liked her as Wendy in, I think it was Dark Matter. I really liked her. I thought that was a great performance. She went from being a friendly, nice android who was willing to, everything from cooking incredible meals from, absolute crap, being totally friendly with everybody, being ready to have sex, and did, with various characters because that was part of that android's programming, to then switching on a dime and becoming a killer robot. Great. I thought that was great. I really liked that. So when she was cast for this, even though she's small, and I thought, she did that, killer robot thing really well. I think she'll probably be okay. No, she's a block of wood. She's a totally unintimidating, rail-thin, anorexic, 5'7" block of wood. I don't know if that's her fault. I don't know if it's what the director's doing. I can't tell. But that character is a block of friggin' wood. She has kind of a smile and a smirk, and that's about all there is to her. So, just generally, Crisis on Infinite Earths in general, their biggest problem is that I understand what they're trying to do. They're trying to replicate Crisis on Infinite Earths in comic books, but you can't do that because the number of characters who were involved in Crisis on Infinite Earths in the comics was astonishingly large, just huge. It was a multi-crossover thing with every book that DC had at that time, in every universe that they had in that time. It was epic, and you can't do that with the few characters that they actually have. And again, soap operaing their way through every episode where the action just comes to a halt while they sit down and have relationship conversations with the people on their shows. Supergirl 63, Adrian Palicki would have been better. I saw the Wonder Woman pilot from 2012. It's not great, but acted in the part well. Yeah, I think that I've seen it too. I thought that was pretty good as well. Adrian Galecki, I've noticed, has had a problem. Excuse me for a second. Hope you didn't hear that. If you did, let me know, and I'll make sure to mute it next time. Adrian Galecki has a problem. When she did Wonder Woman, she was bigger. If you look at her now on the Orville, have a look at her face and her neck. She is becoming rail thin. She is becoming anorexic now. Sorry, had a frog in my throat of enormous proportions. But if they had cast her, if they'd done that Wonder Woman series with Adrian Palicki, yeah, I think she'd have been okay in that. That's the thing about, in general, about the DC characters is that they work better. In general, they have done a better job, cutting out all the stupid soap opera stuff that the Arrowverse does. Those characters actually work better when they're on TV. They have not made good movies with those characters in general in quite some time. Now, early 2000s Batman, that's a whole other thing. That was really good. But most of the time, with the exception of things like Superman 1978, the Tim Burton Batman movie. A lot of people malign that movie. When I first saw that, I thought that was pretty good. I thought that Batman was okay. One of the nice moments, there is one series of scenes at the beginning of the first episode of Crisis on Infinite Earths that, as a fan, was a squee, because we got the Earth 89, which was the Tim Burton one, where you got the Tim Burton Batman music, and you had I've forgotten the actor's name, but he played a reporter in that original Batman movie there. I thought that was great. You go to other universes, and then that final one, Earth 66, with Burt Ward clearly playing Dick Grayson, a much older one, walking, by the way, Ace the Bat Hound, which is something that you saw in the Silver Age. And then turning around and saying, "Holy crimson skies of death!" Well, it was an awesome squee moment. I loved that. I could have seen more of that sort of thing. I thought it was great. By the way, it's great to see the Fandai Master back in action. Yeah, I'm doing a Fandai Master more sort of thing tonight. I can't do politics just endlessly. I might hit on some tonight, but I for something like a live stream, it's hard to keep that up. For a live stream on politics, you need, frankly, a much larger audience who is interested in hearing you bitch about comics. I can't do that in a live stream, and it's, I tell you in all honesty, I way prefer doing this type of talking. But the fact is, Not a lot of people want to watch it. I mean, I got a video over on BitChute that is over 1,100 views. I've never seen anything like that in either format here on YouTube. BitChute's doing a lot better for me. There are more people who seem to want to hear my political commentary. They particularly want to see it if I legitimately get kind of emotional about it. But on one of these streams, I can't do that. I can't stay emotionally invested in something long enough that anybody's going to give a crap. I can do this. Yes, Larry. Burt Ward was wearing the Robin colors on his shirt. Yeah, that's such a great moment, They're pulling in all of these different universes. I also liked the cameo of Lucifer. That was a show that I thought was okay. I wasn't terribly into it. Sorry, another very large frog in my throat. I wasn't that into the show, but I thought it was a great cameo. And what he did there, I thought it was really nice. There's a lot of stuff where they do some interesting cameos. It's just that doing action, doing cool cameos. Okay, let's have Barry and Iris talk for a while. Let's have Block of Wood, Batwoman talk about something or other, her sister, whatever the hell, or Supergirl. Let's stop the action to talk about relationship stuff in there, some of which wasn't even on her own show. That's the thing too. If you're gonna, the way Crisis on Infinite Earths worked in the comics was, there was a comic, Crisis on Infinite Earths, but then there were the individual titles that contributed to that story. You didn't necessarily have to read individual titles, although, DC loved it when you did. But you didn't have to read individual stories necessarily out of individual books. You could get the whole thing over the through line of the story through the book. But when they were in their individual books, and in this case, in their individual shows, the show was not about relationships. The individual ones were not about relationships. It was about how this contributed to the overall story. And I think if you're going to do it where you're going to go, okay, we're going to put this in Supergirl and we're going to focus on Supergirl, well, it needs to be big and it needs to be, something with high stakes, and you can't to pull back and talk about the relationships. Leave that. I mean, I wouldn't even have it at all, or I'd have it very much smaller. But, leave that for when you're not doing something where every single universe, untold, infinite number of lives are snuffed out. I'm sorry. I don't care about Barry and Iris under those circumstances. It should be big and amazing and be all about that. It shouldn't be about, let's stop to have a scene with Barry and Iris where they talk about how Barry knows he's going to die and blah, blah, blah. And he didn't anyway, so. Have I seen the new Midway movie? I have not, and that's because they made a Midway movie in the 1970s, scored, by the way, by Maestro John Williams. And that movie was perfect. I mean, maybe I'll watch this one. I don't know. But in my mind, I'm like, how are you gonna improve on that? It's probably just a lot of action schlock that they throw in. Maybe more realistic than what they could do in the 1970s with Midway. But from my perspective, Midway was a perfect fracking movie. There's just stuff you don't remake. You don't remake Casablanca. I mean, I could see remaking Midway. It's not up there at Casablanca level, but you don't remake Casablanca. You don't remake The Maltese Falcon. There's just a lot of movies you don't touch. And for me, my memories, and I have a copy of Midway. I have a copy of it. I watch it from time to time. For me, the actors in that, they're all very magnetic personalities. They're people who, all of their work is magnetic, a little bit larger than life, and they got so many different, actual stars of that era in there who were magnetic and played those parts perfectly that I'm like, I'm of two minds about seeing the current Midway. I don't know. Maybe it's good. Larry says, talk in the hallway, talk in the corner of the room. Yeah. Yeah. You could, like I said, cut all that stuff out. Maybe have one brief scene where Flash says, well, I got to go save the day. This is obvious. I mean, the thing is, right, the Flash, not to spoil it if you haven't seen it, but the Flash on multiple occasions is saying to Iris, hey, look, I know I have to die on this. And then they're both like, oh, no, you got to die. I'll give you a hug, goodbye, and all this stuff. Please don't die, Barry. Please don't die, Barry. And the stakes are every single life in every single universe. It's obvious that anytime they do anything, any one of them could die. If you're going to have that scene, just have it be, well, I got to go do my thing, kiss, hug, bye. It doesn't need to be in your stupid giant crossover movie or TV series. It's dumb. I'm really hoping that when they come back in January with it, maybe we're going to see some of that ejected. I mean, there's only, 7 of them left? And they don't have, Iris isn't there. None of the people that are, Green Arrow's supporting cast are there. They're all dead. They're all gone. There is no one to sit down and have these stupid soap opera conversations with that just interfere with the action in what should be a gigantic stakes show. Larry says, in Sense-Around. Yes, Sense-Around. I never saw it in Sense-Around, and Super Cool Larry's right. You can remember Sense-Around felt cool. I never saw that movie in Sense-Around in the theaters, but I did see, what's the ones I remember? Battlestar Galactica. Saw Battlestar Galactica in Sense-Around. I may have seen Earthquake in Sense-Around. I think that one was in Sense-Around. That was an interesting idea. Attempting to bring in, a really low bass rumble throughout the theater. I thought that was kind of cool. It was definitely very memorable, and particularly, I think, science fiction that worked real well. Don't remember in Midway because I didn't see it. So, Supercruise63 says the Midway movie from 1976 had one of the best all-star casts that will never happen again in Hollywood. Absolutely. There were so many really big names that you can't even list them all. Like Henry Fonda, playing Admiral Nimitz. Henry frackin' Fonda. God, I don't even remember all of them. It's a jumble because there's so many of them, and they all play their parts perfectly. It's just great. It's just great. As I say, I have no giant desire to go out and watch Midway again because that one sticks in my mind so well. I may watch it. My feeling on these current remakes, what they like to call reboots, but they're actually just remakes. The current remakes generally just get stupid, and they generally just have lots of gratuitous special effects. And maybe that's not the case with the current Midway, with the Midway remake. I don't know. I haven't a clue. I haven't seen it. But in general, when you get into this stuff, it is like Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker. There's stuff in there that's just there to have gratuitous special effects. There are plot holes that you could drive, 5 or 6 Amtrak trains that are parallel to each other straight through the plot holes. Yes, Charlton Heston. There you go, Larry. Another one. Charlton fraggin' Heston. Anything that he ever did was pretty damn good. And he plays a captain in Midway that's great, Robert Mitchum as Bull Helsley, Chuck Heston. Yeah, all of these big stars of that time. I don't know what the budget on that was, but man, they had to have been paying a lot of money for their cast. And also Larry says, Earthquake Towering Inferno in Sense-Around. Yeah, I don't think I ever saw Towering Inferno in Sense Around. I think I probably saw Towering Inferno much later, like on TV or something. The reason for that is I generally have one of my biggest phobias, my biggest fears is burning to death. I really don't like to even think about that. So I have only watched Towering Inferno a few times for that very reason. It's just it's my hang up. I get it. It's not a bad movie. When I've seen it, it's a pretty decent movie. When it's disaster porn, but it's still a pretty decent movie. It's just that you're off into an area that's like really uncomfortable for me. I don't even like to think about it. I just no. Philo's 4R, right? Great to see you. I have a number of regular viewers when I do these. Great to see you here. I hope you like what I'm doing, and I hope you come back for more. Money-making shams for the dumb millennials that don't know any better. Well, I have children that are millennials. I have some very strong feelings about millennials that I talk about in some of my politics videos. I'm not going to do it here particularly, but my children are millennials. The problem isn't that they're dumb. The problem is that they haven't been educated. They were never educated. And so they can't appreciate a movie that is more cerebral than all of this giant special effects and good God, Michael Bay level crap. And so Rise of Skywalker is problematic there. Again, now, I agree with George Lucas. I started out on this a little bit. I agree with George Lucas when he said that these are movies for 12-year-olds. And that's fine. I have no problem with it. I was 12 years old when I saw the first one in an actual theater. And I think he's right. Star Wars should be movies for 12-year-olds. It's not for people like me to go back and relive their childhood. Star Wars was a phenomenon at the time that will never be able to be recreated for me. But on the other hand, if you're going to make a good Star Wars movie, it has to have a plot that makes sense. It can't have extraneous action that doesn't belong in it. It can't have action sequences that are just excuses for action sequences. Star Wars, the original one, had a plot that made perfect sense. It was a hero's journey type of plot that was the sort of thing that you see throughout history, and it made sense. There's nothing in that movie that's extraneous. There's nothing in that movie that makes you stop and go, hey, wait a minute, how did you do this? Why did this happen? What's going on? Who's doing what? Why is the people doing these things? Why did this happen? And it doesn't have any stakes. Even as an adult, you can look at that and go, okay, it's just a fun action movie. And it's fine if you want to make a fun action movie, but it has to freaking make sense, Larry says, I'll be driving to work now, but I'll keep listening. Well, thank you very much, Larry. God, driving to work right now. I don't know what time zone you're in. We're coming up on, it's 10:28 here. So it's 11:28 Eastern. So that's when I'll hit my first part of New Year's Eve or New Year's Day. So thanks for listening. I appreciate that very much. Thank you. But, Rise of Skywalker, let me give you a perfect example of something that you either have a stake for, that you keep to, and it has consequences, or you just take it out of the movie because it doesn't matter. And that is C-3PO having to have his memory wiped. Okay, if you're going to write that as kind of a death of a character that is, okay, we need to find this MacGuffin. We need to find it bad. The only way we can do it is essentially by killing one of the characters, or in this case, C-3PO, the famous scaredy cat of all of the movies, himself says, if I don't do this, everything we've done is for nothing. Okay, that's good. That's fine. That has a consequence. You say, okay, that has a consequence. The price for doing and getting this MacGuffin that we really need is we are going to lose the C-3PO that we know and love. That's great. That's drama. That's something with consequence. But at the end, when you just reverse it all, it's stupid. There's no consequence. There's absolutely no consequence. It destroys all of the drama about C-3PO deciding, okay, I'm going to do it. You have to keep it. I have to keep that consequence in the movie so that the viewer goes crying their eyes out, because this is a character we've known and loved since 1977. You have to keep that consequence in, or if it's going to make no difference, take it out. Throw it away. If you have consequence-free things in your movie, throw it out of the movie. Doesn't belong in the movie. Yeah, your actions have to have lasting consequences. And when they did that, it's just like, well, throw it out. Just have C-3PO be able to translate the thing, period. Don't do this big thing. Can't translate Sith unless you reset my memory. It's consequence-free. You can't have consequence-free actions. There's a lot of that in, Rise of Skywalker. And the other thing, too, the one thing that's really, really obvious to me, a lot of people are scratch their heads about the first 40 minutes of this film. I timed it, actually. The first 40 minutes of this film are, I think, what J.J. Abrams would have made for the second movie, because it spends the entire time retconning and resetting and minimizing down all of the crap that everybody hated about The Last Jedi. And I'm one of those people who hated Last Jedi in every way, mostly for what they did to Luke. I'm not reliving my childhood here, and I get that this movie is supposed to be for 12-year-olds, and I am not 12. I am in almost a couple of hours away from now, 14 days out from my 55th birthday. I get that I am not reliving my childhood, but the movie still needs to make some sense. And as someone, if you're not reliving my childhood, that's fine. I want to see these characters that were in my childhood become the character that I would hope as an adult that they would become. So what I want to see is what J.J. Abrams did with Luke in the first 40 minutes and then later on in the film. I wanted Luke to be the wise Jedi Master. I wanted Luke, identify with Luke, always have. Everybody identifies with Luke. He's one of the characters that you can always identify with. And if he's going to grow old, I want him to grow old gracefully into the sort of person that idealized myself would be. I'm not reliving my childhood here. I want 12-year-olds to be able to have the same fun that I did when I was 12 and saw this film. But if you're going to do that, I want to see the characters that I grew up with grow up as somebody who is the wise Jedi Master, the Obi-Wan Kenobi. This is the idealized form of what I would hope that these characters would grow up to be. You can have all the others. You can have Luke even be secondary. Obi-Wan Kenobi was an important, very important part of Star Wars. But, when you look at where he actually was and how much he was in the films, he wasn't in the films all that much. His impact was there. That's what I want Luke to be. I wanted Luke to be the wise Jedi Master. And by making him a guy who drinks stupid, straight out of the giant sea cow's udders milk and no, I'm sorry. That was a character assassination. And I do have to, give it to J.J. Abrams some that he retconned some of that out. And in fact, Luke told Rey as a Force ghost, yeah, I was wrong. Okay, good. As a Force ghost, he's far more like the character that people my age would have wanted him to grow up to be. The same thing can be said of the other 3 or 4 characters. Is JJ's fault. Leia and Han should never have separated. That was a love story that worked. What I really wanted to see, actually, if it was just me, and again, you didn't have to make them big characters in this film. They didn't have to be the focus of the film, although I think Disney really screwed the pooch when they didn't at least have a scene, however brief, with Luke, Leia, and Han in the same scene. Getting the band back together. Luke, Leia, Han, and Chewie. Just one scene. That's all I would have needed. So, I forgot where I was going with this. I was talking off the top of my head, and when I do that, I usually have scripting stuff or at least bullet points. But you don't have to take these characters that I grew up with and make them the focus of the story. You can just have them Leia and Han. These are characters who never should have broken up. They should never have broken up. This was a love story, and they were perfect for each other and should never have broken up. What I would have liked to have seen would be like Leia being some kind of important figure in the New Republic government, with Han having kind of settled down a little bit like Lando Calrissian. An older guy who can no longer go around and do all these crazy action things that he used to do, a little wiser, somebody who's an administrator now, somebody who can, a character can come to him for advice, and he can say, okay, well, you might try this, you might try that, and, well, why don't you come out and help me, Han? Well, hey, dude, my action running around crazy days are over. I'm getting old. I can't do that. You do that. That would have been fine. That would have been fine. We need these characters. That's all they had to do, and I don't know why they screwed the pooch on it so bad. I just don't know. I mean, I get that they want to focus on the new characters, but that doesn't mean you have to totally assassinate all the rest of them. And then of course, the decision in Last Jedi to have Luke disappear and become a Force ghost really backfired on him when Carrie Fisher passed away. They should have figured a way to exit her from the series and keep Luke. And I think the first 40 minutes of this film are exactly what J.J. Abrams would have probably done if he'd been doing the middle film in the trilogy. I know exactly where you have ended it. You start out, if he'd been doing this, it would have started out with Rey being trained by Luke off on some planet someplace, similar to what we saw in Return of the Jedi, and then she says, I gotta go. My friends are in danger. I gotta go help them. And Luke's like, no, you really shouldn't. Similar to Empire, but you don't have to be a carbon copy of Empire. But I know where I would have ended it, because where it would have ended, where that film should have ended, would be when Chewie died, or looked like he was dead. That's where I think the thing would have been. That would be the low point in these characters' lives. You've got, Rey, who has just suddenly, totally unexpectedly, shot Force lightning out that destroyed a ship. And she is like, oh my God, I killed Chewbacca. End of movie. First 40 minutes of that film, and I timed it. It's 40-minute mark is when Chewie appears to die. That would have been all right. And in the next film, you could come back and say, oh, thank God Chewie wasn't on that ship. But at the same time, you can still have Rey being like, I shot Force freaking lightning and blew up a ship. How the hell? That would have been okay. That would have been fine. Supercrew63 says J.J. Abrams is absolute best at screwing up our sci-fi worlds. Yeah, he took Star Trek and made it into generic action schlock. J.J. Abrams can't write. Let's just say it outright. J.J. Abrams cannot write. He's a good director of action movies. I think if you gave him a good story, a good trilogy written by somebody completely else, maybe he'd have come up with good direction and stuff like that. But the man can't write. The man cannot write. He can write only plot holes and generic action schlock, and that's all. Don't let that man near a typewriter. If you want to rank a movie, don't let him near a typewriter. You could do better with a room full of an infinite number of monkeys than you could with J.J. Abrams. The man cannot write. He can direct pretty well. He can do action sequences like nobody's business, but you should never let him near a word processor. He is a hack writer. Just a hack. But some of my problems with Rise of Skywalker, again, first 40 minutes of that movie, I think, are really what he would have made if he'd made the middle movie. There's so much retconning going on. There's so much downplaying of stuff. Hey, how many times do we see Rose Tico in this film, right? She was never going to be a character, not in his trilogy if he'd made it, and that would have been perfectly fine. Not that I have any problems with Rose Tico and the actress. Oh, man. There's several actors in Hollywood that have faced severe backlashes because people didn't like their characters. Will Wheaton, for example, right? The way that Wesley Crusher was written in the first season of Star Trek: The Next Generation was so bad. There are a million ways you could have written that character so that he could have grown. He was written in a way that, he was perfect from day one. And it was always just a question of when are the other characters going to recognize how awesome he is? No. What should have happened was Wesley thinks he's perfect, but then he discovers that all of the expertise and training and experience of all the other people get him in trouble. He thinks, oh, I've got it. I know how to save the ship. Blows it completely one time. Gets humbled by it. And then says, okay, I'm not that great. These people around me are experts at what they do. I'm pretty knowledgeable, and I'm really smart. But I ain't them. And you could have grown him into a character then that, would be somebody that 5 years later, the audience goes, okay, yeah, mm-hmm. He goes to Starfleet Academy. He's a good guy. He knows what he's doing. But by making him perfect in every way from the beginning, the fans hated him. And it's not Will Wheaton's fault. That's the fault of the writing. But Will Wheaton personally faced a lot of backlash over that, such that I think it contributed to his overall depression that he still suffers from. And, the same thing with Rose Tico. I've forgotten the name of the actress who played her. Crappy character. Just a terrible character. Shouldn't have been in the movies ever. But she quit social media because she was getting so many people who were insulting her personally, when really it was just crappy writing. Her acting was okay. She did all right with the character. It's just the character sucked. It's not her fault the character sucked. There's a number of actors who have in science fiction in particular, that fans just go, you guys got it. Oh, the guy who played Jar Jar Binks. Holy crap. There's a video on YouTube of him talking about how he went through an incredible low point, almost killed himself because he was getting so much negative backlash from the fans who were not discriminating between the fact that it was a crappily written character as opposed to the actor himself. The actor did fine. There's nothing wrong with his performance. It's the character that sucked. It's something that fans need to learn. Sometimes a character is written like crap, and it's not the actor's fault. If you want to blame somebody for Wesley Crusher, you go straight to Gene Roddenberry. You say, Gene, that was shitty. It's not Will Wheaton's fault. If you want to blame somebody for Rose Tico, you go to Ruin Johnson and you say, Ruin, you have written a stupid character that should never have been in this film. But the actress, fine. If you want to talk about Jar Jar Binks, you get straight to George Lucas and say, George, it's a stupid character. But the actor, he's fine. You have to be able to discriminate. And fans have a long history of not being able to do that. So anyway, with respect again to Rise of Skywalker, I'll tell you one thing. I have been totally uninvested in every single one of the newer characters because of the way they're written. Actors, hey guys, I think you're fine. But the way the characters have been written is something that is unengaging. For the first time, and this is one of the things that actually happened that I thought was right. For the first time for me in Rise of Skywalker, particularly towards the beginning, when these characters are interacting with each other and actually have to seem to have some good emotional undercurrent running with them, then I started to, appreciate them and empathize with them to some extent. It will never be perfect because, again, J.J. Abrams can't write. You would be better with a room filled with an infinite number of monkeys and typewriters. But there were moments in that, and moments that started happening in the movie where I went, okay, all right, I can get behind these characters now. It's not character assassination of the ones that I love. It's something that 12-year-olds could enjoy. Just that the plot was dumb in places, had consequence-free actions that should never have been in the film. Again, if you're going to make a movie, your actions have to have consequences. If they don't have consequences, don't put them in the movie. It's that simple. If your actions don't have consequences, then who cares? Why should I care about something that happens that has no, when C-3PO gets his memory wiped and gets it back, there's no consequence there. If when you do something, the outcome is exactly the same as if you didn't do it, it shouldn't be in the movie. It just shouldn't be in the movie. You have to have consequences. And, that was one of the things about that. And, of course, there are plot holes. There's plot holes. The movie seems kind of all over the place in terms of the plot. And, again, I agree with George Lucas when he originally said it, that these are movies made for 12-year-olds. Absolutely. But there's no reason that you can't have a movie made for 12-year-olds that makes sense. Star Wars, the original one, simple story, very similar to many other hero's journey stories that we've seen throughout history. It's not unique at all, but it was done in a way that a 12-year-old could like it. But looking back as an adult, it's hard to find too many plot holes. It's hard to find too many things that don't make sense. Everything tends to flow and make sense as an adult. There is no reason that you couldn't write modern Star Wars in a way that makes perfect sense. Wouldn't even mind a hero's journey with Rey. I wouldn't even mind a hero's journey with Rey. It is a problem that they just, and of course Rey, everybody's pointed this out. Rey is practically perfect in every way. She might as well be Mary Poppins. She's perfect. She's better than everybody. She knows everything and how to do it. It's not compelling. Your characters have to have character flaws. Always. 'Cause Superman has to have kryptonite. Superman's got to have kryptonite. If he doesn't, he beats everybody, period, and you're done. But the characters have to have flaws. Rey should be somebody who maybe trips and falls a few times, maybe does a couple of things that backfire on her. That's why I thought, the ending point for what would have been Abrams' middle movie was when Rey thinks that she has killed Chewbacca with Force lightning. It's her only stumbling point. It's when she's like, oh my God, I did this thing and it's so bad. That's when I empathized with her. And she can come back from that. That's when I empathized with her. Interesting thing that the guys at Red Letter Media once did. They do Plinkett reviews of. If you haven't seen them, you need to go watch the Plinkett reviews. You can start with the first one, which was for the Star Trek movies, but he really got into his groove. Mike Stoklasa and the people over at Red Letter Media really got into their groove when they started doing reviews of the Star Wars prequel films. And one of the things that he did in the first one, when he was reviewing Phantom Menace, was he said that a protagonist should be written in such a way that you can sit down and say, describe this character as if you were talking to somebody who had never seen Star Wars before and had no idea who they were. Okay, all right. Obi-Wan Kenobi, wise old sage. Luke Skywalker, young hero who overcomes things and then becomes the hero that saves the day. Han Solo, the thief with the heart of gold. Princess Leia, the princess who is real strong and can get everybody around her who she thinks and practically is stupider than her. She can run the joint. C-3PO, scaredy cat. You can go through that with all the Star Wars characters. In very short order, you can give a real simple, easy description of what these characters break down to. Describe Rey to me. What is it about Rey? What can I say to somebody who's never seen Star Wars before to describe Rey? I have no freaking clue. Same thing with all the rest of those characters. I have no clue what I can say about them. What do you say about them? What can I say that defines Rey in a brief way so that if nobody who'd ever seen Star Wars, what do you say about her? Well, she's perfect. No, what do you say about Poe? Well, they say he's a good pilot, and the CGI shows him being one. But what about his character? What does he care about? What is he like inside? All of them. What is the shorthand that you can say to somebody who's never seen Star Wars before? What are these characters about? Who knows? I can't think of anything. It was the same thing with the prequel trilogy. When he did it, he said, okay, just without mentioning what the character's job or their costume or anything like that is, describe to me Princess Amidala. Well, yeah, I don't know. Describe to me Qui-Gon Jinn. Well, you can't say he's a Jedi. You can't say his job. You can't say the costume. What is he? The best one I heard with Red Letter Media was, well, he's stern. It's just stuff like that. You can at least say Jar Jar Binks, complete schmuck, who practically screws up everything he touches. That's it. But there really isn't that much you can say about those characters where you can describe them in sort of a shorthand. And I think the stronger the character is, the easier it is to describe that. You can go through almost any movie and say that. Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. Describe Khan. A madman, bent on revenge. That's it. That's his character in a nutshell. Madman bent on revenge. Kirk in that film. Who's Kirk in that film? If you don't know anything about Star Trek, what do you say about Kirk in Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan? Guy getting older, feeling like he's just aging out and isn't relevant anymore. But then he comes back into the saddle and overcomes what he thinks are his problems and ends up feeling like a younger man. It's easy. A good movie, good character, you can do that with. A crappy movie with crappy characters, you can't. And unfortunately, the entire prequel trilogy and the entire sequel trilogy are filled with things like that. And I was a little disappointed about the Emperor. One of the nice things about the Emperor. Here's a good shorthand of the Emperor. Pure evil, and he loves it. He just enjoys being evil. He just loves being evil. There's very few. There are very the general shorthand when actors talk about it is, right, if you're playing a bad guy, if you're playing somebody who's evil, you, as the character, you cannot think of yourself as evil. You can do horrible things, but the character itself must have something internally going on with them that makes it so that to them, these are justifiable actions. Well, the Emperor of the Galaxy, the Emperor Palpatine, is very different from that. He's trying to take over the galaxy, that's for sure. But he just loves being evil. He's cackling and he does horrible things, and he does stuff with his voice that's sometimes way over the top, but boy does it work. And in this one, they weren't able to do that with him. He wasn't just getting off on being evil. And I think that's a problem when you get to the Emperor. By the way, the whole thing with Snoke, right? When they whacked him in the second movie, I don't, for no particular reveal or purpose, I think that that was not what J.J. Abrams had in mind. I think J.J. Abrams had in mind that twisted up body that was Snoke was actually Emperor Palpatine. They had to retcon it by saying that Palpatine created Snoke. But I think the original idea that probably J.J. Abrams was going with was it was the Emperor all along. It was just that by whatever means that he escaped destruction on the Death Star had screwed him up over his body terribly. And that was going to be the reveal that he was in fact the Emperor. And there we get into one of the hugest plot holes in this film. How the hell did he survive? How did the Emperor survive that? To begin with, we as viewers saw him fall down a bottomless shaft and either explode himself or be killed by an explosion. It's never quite certain. My assumption was all along that when he fell down that shaft and he hit the bottom and he died, there was all this gigantic release of force energy, and that's what we were seeing coming up out of that thing. And then the Death Star itself exploded. How does he ever come back from that? It was like when they brought back Darth Maul. I know they did that in some TV show, but I'm sorry. Darth Maul was cut in half and fell down a bottomless pit. He's dead. You don't bring him back. Did the same thing in some of the novels with Boba Fett. Last we saw, he fell into the Sarlacc and was going to be digested over 1,000 years. He's dead. He's dead. You can't bring him back for other stuff. He's dead. He's dead. He's dead. You just gotta, So how did the Emperor survive? How did he... Plot hole big enough to drive Amtrak trains through, How the hell did the Emperor survive? No explanation given. No explanation given. There's a lot of stuff like that in the film where you just, if you sit back and you go, what, why, how, what, when, where, what, who did this, how did that happen? Giant fleet of Star Destroyers that he had. The only way that works is if he has been building this massive fleet ever since he lost and the Republic came back. That's the only way this works, is if he's been doing this since forever. But even then, you're like, okay, what? And again, it's a movie for 12-year-olds, but that doesn't mean it doesn't have to make sense. You still have to make sense. Other things that pop up to me just instantly, of course, are they send Lando Calrissian out to find help. And at the end, of course, it looks like there's no help whatsoever. Nobody's going to come. And then, Lando says, on your left, sort of. On your left. And all of a sudden, this gigantic fleet pops out. Again, what? At the end of the last movie, nobody was even answering their calls for help. And now, all of a sudden, in a period of, I don't know how long, but not very long, screen time-wise, Lando Calrissian has a chance to go out and talk to 4 bajillion people to get their ships, or half of 4 bajillion people for the governments that are involved in bringing those ships. What? How do you go from nobody gives a crap to everybody shows up in like 2 hours? It's stuff like that, plot holes like that. You can make movies for 12-year-olds. I mean, it's exciting. It's exciting to see all those ships. It's the sort of thing a 12-year-old might want to see. Exciting thing to see all of, the space battles and stuff. It was certainly exciting for me when I was 12. But again, Star Wars made sense. It made sense. It was a plot that made sense. And there's no reason that you can't do these. Still make it for 12-year-olds, but have a plot that makes sense. Have it be something where I, as an adult, can walk into and go, oh, okay, this is a fun little movie. This is still a fun little movie. It's not made for me. That's fine, but it's a fun little movie. They do this all the time. They call them family films. They're actually aimed at a smaller, younger crowd. But the movie makes sense, and the older viewer can still go, it's a fun little movie. It's not made for me, but it's a fun little movie. I'm never going to recapture my childhood, and I'm not expecting to at age almost 55. Oh, by the way, missed the countdown. It is on the East Coast now. It is midnight. Happy New Year's to the people on my viewers who may be on the East Coast of North America, the United States. It is now 1 minute after midnight. So happy New Year, and happy technically one day away from the new decade. But hey, everybody's calling it a new decade anyway. So we're in 2020 in the East Coast at this point. So happy New Year. I'm going to be around for at least another hour until we hit New Year in Central Time. Depending on how I just free associate, which is what I'm doing right now, depending on how much I free associate and about what, I could conceivably go longer than that. I don't know. The problem with me is that I am old and decrepit, and I have problems with my lower back. And the issue is that I sit upright in this chair, and the longer I do it, the worse my lower back feels, and I'm going to feel it through tomorrow. I'm on a bit of a fixed income, and about the only thing that helps with this is significant deep tissue massage that costs $60 per visit where I am. So once I'm in a position, and my financial situation is improving, but in a month or two, it'll be up to the point where I can afford to just go once a week. Right now, I can't go nearly that frequently, and so I sit in this chair for a long time, and my lower back starts to hurt. And problem is, if I don't sit up more or less, Alexandering up like I've talked about before, if I lean back in my chair like I'd like to, I start to look fatter. And I am just vain enough that I don't want to look that fat, so I end up sitting up a little straighter, and it hurts my lower back. So at some point, maybe that'll be not of a problem. But 3 minutes after midnight, the ball in Times Square has no doubt fallen. I'm not doing anything like showing any of this stuff that's happening either here or anywhere else, because my equipment isn't any good. In about March, this is all gonna change. The stuff that I beg for, both in my, the beginning when I asked for support and stuff, my financial situation will have improved to the point where I'm going to be able to get the laptop that I need for this, that will allow me to, it should allow me to do streaming at 1080p and 60 frames per second, rather than the 720p and 10 frames per second that you're seeing at now. So I'm looking very much forward to that. A lot of things are going to clear up within the next few months. So, but again, happy New Year to New Year plus 4 minutes. I don't drink because, in the immortal words of Wilford Brimley, I got the diabetes, and that stuff isn't good for me. I drink water, flavored water, and salads, eat salads and stuff. And that's how I control my diabetes. But if you are on the East Coast, feel free to be as drunk as you want right now. Just make sure you have a designated driver if you're out in public. And don't go around beating people up and causing fights, because alcohol tends to make you a little bit more aggressive. So if I'm around long enough, if my back survives long enough to hit mountain time in a couple of hours, I will be saying, yeah, go and smoke up all the weed you want. Just make sure you have a designated driver. And hey, I don't think you have to worry too much about getting aggressive. Just have lots of munchies around. So, but I'm not sure that I have a hell of a lot else to say about the Rise of Skywalker. It's J.J. Abrams' movie. reasonably well-directed, really well-directed when it comes to action. But the man can't write. This is clear from everything he's made. Do not let him near a word processor. Do not let his friends near a word processor. Don't even let his friends near a word processor. If you're going to do that, just hire an infinite number of monkeys. Superguru63 says, after my heart attack, I can't even eat bacon anymore. I'm at a point where that's not an issue for me. Bacon is something I can eat. My problem is that where I'm living right now, my mother's getting on in years, and so some of what I do is intended to be around if she needs something. And so she buys a lot of food that I can't eat, and I get sugar cravings in the evenings, and I have to really have a lot of self-control to not go up and eat the stuff that she eats. When I was completely living by myself, it was simple. I would just buy what I knew I could eat, which was about 15 things out of the grocery store. You will not believe how sick you get of cheese after a while, how sick you get of cottage cheese, how sick you get of certain meats, because it's all you're eating. And that's why I have to be very careful. Don't go eat the stuff that my mom eats. It's not good for me. Well, I'm sorry to hear that you can't have bacon anymore. I hope I don't get to that point. My diet is already so restrictive that if I couldn't eat meat, oh, God, what would I do? Be surviving on cheese and salads, and that would be about all. And ranch dressing. I'm getting sick of ranch dressing again. So what I wind up having to do is go back and forth. I'll eat a bunch of cheese for a while until I'm sick of it. Then I'll go on to cottage cheese until I'm sick of it. Then I'll go on to certain types of meat, hamburgers, until I'm sick of it. And it's just, that's so restrictive. If I had to cut out things like bacon, I'd be like, oh, no. Scrambled eggs until I'm sick of it. You know. But anyway, 7 minutes after 12 on the East Coast. Drink up, have fun. Party down. Don't do anything too crazy, especially in New York City. Cops have a lot to do, as it is, dealing with all the drunken people and things that they have to deal with on New Year's Eve. I'm sure it's a hell night for them when they, call on people who would ordinarily have a day off. So if you're out there and you're partying and stuff, be cool about it. Don't make it something where it's going to get the cops in. And if you're a gang member or something, let's just take the evening off. I know that it happens all the time. I used to live in Chicagoland. And whenever there's a big, thing like New Year's Eve where there's a lot of people in one place where they know they've got to put a lot of cops, well, that's when the gang members decide it's a perfect time to settle a few scores, and especially in Chicago, freaking murder capital of the world practically. Guys, you guys in the gangs, the Bloods and the Crips, let's just take the night off. Let's just not decide to settle some scores tonight. Let's be cool. So, about 50 more minutes. Going to get to actually New Year's Eve where I live, and they in point of fact, as I say, I can't do things like show videos and stuff, but in point of fact here, we don't have the ball falling or anything like that in Times Square. Where I live is a city of the metro, I believe, is somewhere in the vicinity of 630,000, if I recall correctly. It's been a while since I've looked it up. And I'm half an hour away from a city that is 1 million people. So, we have all of our, fireworks and stuff like that. And in 50 minutes, that'll be going on here. Sadly, I cannot show it because it would cause the stream to collapse. Whenever I've tried doing something like that, it kills my stream. So all I can show you is what maybe things would look like as we're getting close to New Year's Eve out on the South Dakota Prairie, which I have a very big affinity for. I have spent a lot of time out there when I was a kid. I'm not really somebody who lives in the country, despite the brand that I'm projecting. I actually live in a city, and But this is what it would look like out there. One of the things that's really nice out there is that on a clear night, that's your sky. You can see everything. You can see stars that you will never see in or around a city because of light pollution. You can often make out the entire Milky Way across the top of you, in extraordinary detail. I'm really interested by some of the new cameras and phones that will let you actually get those things. When I get one, probably won't be for a couple of years, but when I get one from one of my phones, I'm going out to my family ranch land, and I'm going to take some pictures of what the sky looks like out there on a clear night. But, they're not going to have any fireworks out there, probably drinking it up a bit. But this is what it looks like. This is what it looks like out in the real upper Great Plains of the United States. Just calm. Out there where my family's ranch land is, you can hear someone driving on the gravel road that is 2 miles away. That's how quiet it can get. And again, the sky is amazing, in terms of what you can see on a clear night. And clear nights are pretty common out there right now. Oh man, I wouldn't want to be out there right now. They're farther north of where I live that they have been getting some really bad, severe snow this year. It's not uncommon because a little bit farther north you get a lot more snow. But it's I've been getting alerts on my phone about it constantly. So they've had some really bad snow out there. I wouldn't want to be out there right now. One of the things you have to remember about a place out there, especially the upper Great Plains, there are paved roads and stuff. We have interstate highways that are paved. You have county highways and U.S. highways that are all paved. But in between all of those is a lot of ranch land with a lot of cattle. And the only roads are gravel roads. And these gravel roads are not regular roads. They are, mile after mile after mile, 60, 70, 80, 100 miles of a lane and a half of gravel. And it is graded from time to time by the county, but it is last on the list of doing things in terms of snow removal. In fact, sometimes they don't do snow removal at all. So you have 2 feet of snow out there, and you with your pickup truck or your tractor, and it's the attachment on the front that is a plow, you get to do it. You're the one that gets to do all of the plowing out there, except in certain circumstances. So right now they're getting dumped with snow on, and I wouldn't want to be there right now. I am too much. I love the place, but I am too much of a city boy. I want to be able to drive around without myself having to go and plow all the roads, if they even do. Sometimes it's so bad that they resort to 18th century technology, and you actually ride horses around there. It's fairly unusual. Today, the horse has largely been replaced by the pickup truck. When you see people who have pickup trucks, if they're in an urban area, it's mostly just because they like pickup trucks. But if you're off in a rural area, a pickup truck is an absolute necessity as a tool. You cannot get around without a pickup truck. It is a necessity. There aren't very many roads. You're off-road a lot of the time. You're in ruts a lot of the time. You're on 2 lane and a half gravel highways a lot of the time. So you need that pickup. You need the back of it, the bed to be fairly large, because you need to be able to put 1,500 to 2,000 pound cattle into the back of the thing and transport them from wherever they're grazing, because they free-range graze out there, from wherever they're grazing into a corral so that you can maybe treat them. Another thing about living out there is a rancher is both a rancher and a veterinarian and a medical doctor. One of my uncles didn't wait to get to the hospital in order to be born. My grandfather delivered him. And you're at the same time, sometimes you have to euthanize an animal because it has gotten into a situation where, one I remember is where we had a cow that had broken 3 of its legs. There were two choices there. It may sound like it's nasty to have to kill them, but there's 2 choices. You either shoot them, or You wait around until nighttime when the coyotes come to eat them alive. Now you tell me which of those alternatives is the more compassionate one. The more compassionate one is to shoot them. Excuse me. So the average rancher has to do a lot of different things out there. There are also mechanics because you have a lot of heavy equipment. It's not like you can have it towed into town in order to have somebody look at it. It's not even like you can have somebody come out from town to look at it. You got to fix it. Perfect example of how self-sufficient you got to be on those type of places. When my grandfather and grandmother passed away, we have a family cemetery. There's a plot for me someday out there. And when we went out to bury them, it's way out in the middle of nowhere, 60 miles worth of gravel road, and we went out to bury them. One of my, I don't know if exactly what he is. He's like a second cousin or something. Well, he has a backhoe. So he went out and he dug the grave. And then myself and a cousin and with some uncles, we physically lowered those caskets into the ground by ourselves. And then my second cousin or whatever he is covered over the grave. Because there's nobody else to do it. If you don't do it, it don't get done. It's just that simple. One time too, there's a cabin out there that had been moved at one point off of a floodplain and up to somewhere that was higher that doesn't get flooded like crazy. And so there was, however, a porch for that had been built by a pair of my uncles, and that was still down on the floodplain, and we wanted to move it. But it's a big porch. It was made out of wood. It was something they'd put together when they were much younger. Well, how are you going to get it up there? How are you going to get up the floodplain? What are you going to do? Well, the first thing you do is you look around for discarded things or pieces of things that you can use. In this case, we found a bunch of barbed wire. Then you disconnect the barbed wire fence that was around where this thing used to be because you want to keep the cattle out. You disconnect the barbed wire fence from the fence posts. You push it down. You wrap a bunch of barbed wire across one end of this wooden porch. You attach it to a couple of different vehicles that have hitches, and then you drag it across the pasture up until you get it to where you want it to be. Then you take off all the barbed wire from it. You take it all back down to the original site. You redo the barbed wire, reattach it to the fence posts, and then put the barbed wire that you used back where you got it. And if you don't do it, it don't get done. You have to be very, very self-sufficient out there in order to even live. It's why I just laugh. If you look at Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who is always on this show referred to as a Red Cortez because it fits. If you look at her, she's got on her Instagram page, she has like all this stuff about, gardening in the big city and things like that, and, how it's the way of the future. And it's like, do you know how much crop is required to feed even you just personally? Do you know how long it takes for those crops to grow? Do you know how to cultivate those crops properly so that they will grow into something you can eat? I mean, it's cute, Alexandria. Oh, look, you got, some strawberries to grow. You're not going to live off strawberries. You're not even going to live off of anything that you can fit into a garden in a large city. You just can't. You need endless tracts of land with an enormous amount of crops just to feed a few people. It has to be big, and it's not going to just grow itself overnight. You have to spend a lot of time working it. So, you just got to laugh at her. She's young and she's stupid. It's just that simple. She's young and she's very, very provincial. She comes from a place where You don't ever have to think about those things. In fact, she made an extraordinarily, what we consider in our part of the world, a very, very insulting video one time, not too long ago, where she was, talking about all this endless land and blah, 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 and how it shouldn't be something where people can vote, blah, 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 electoral college, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, you dimwit, do you not understand that this is where you're getting your food? That everything that you're looking at around here feeds more than 1 billion people in the world? Because that's the truth. That's the case. That's the honest to God truth. The United States agricultural output is so good because of modern science. And people who live out there are not stupid. They're scientists. They have bachelor's degrees in agricultural science, bachelor's degrees in agricultural engineering, because you cannot feed 1 billion people worldwide without science. And you're just like, Alexandria, do you not get this? You apparently think, that food is created at the grocery store? No, man, it's a lot of work. And, to be dissing all of us in this part of the country is just stupid on your part. So, Alexandria, if you ever happen to watch, try this or another video where I happen to talk about it. I'm not going to dwell on politics. I don't want to do that necessarily tonight. It's not. It's New Year's Eve. We can wish Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez a happy New Year. It's 20 minutes after 12 where she is. I assume, in the Bronx or parts of Queens. So we can wish her a happy New Year and put our differences aside for a little while. Hopefully. I don't know if she's capable of it, but I am. Happy New Year, Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez. I hope you're having a fun time wherever you are. And you're with friends and boozing it up and having a grand old time. So I guess it's about 40 minutes until I get to our own New Year's Eve here. Again, happy New Year's to the people on the East Coast, and I hope you're having a lot of fun. Just make sure you got a designated driver. But, gosh, what else can I talk about? What else can I free associate about for the next 40 minutes? I probably won't go past Central Time. I really do, man. I don't have it in me to do the next 2 hours after that, I don't think, to get all the way across North America. And if I want to be really crazy, I could stay up long enough to do it over to Hawaii and Alaska. But I'm not that crazy. So I probably kill it in about 40 minutes when, it comes around in my part of the country. What else can I gibber on about tonight? Well, as I said earlier, I had the opportunity. My children were driving back from their mother's house in suburban Chicago today and stopped to have dinner with me, which was great. I don't get nearly as many opportunities as I'd like to see them. They are adults. I am 55, and they are no longer children. They are adults with their own boyfriends and probably at some point their own families. I'm already a great uncle. I have I have a great niece and a great nephew. Boy, I tell you, those kids, like my own, for that matter. Supercruise 63 says 9:23 here in the People's Republic of California. Well, I don't, I've had a lot of time to think about it. This is something I can gibber about. I've had a lot of time to think about it, and I may make a video. This is me drifting off into politics. I think it may be time for California to split into 2 states. One that includes basically the Southern California seaboard, maybe from about San Diego up to San Francisco. Let themselves call themselves California. The rest break away and become the state of Jefferson. I think it may be time for that. I think there is such a disconnect between what urban area wants and what non-gigantic urban area wants. And there's a lot of farmland and stuff out there. And the conditions in those 2 parts of the state are so radically different that it may be time to just break off into 2 states. I don't know what you think about that, Supercruise 63, but in looking at it, and I haven't been to any of those places in a long time. I rely, unfortunately, on videos and stuff that I'm seeing of the western seaboard. Um, Boy, that looks like a real mess. From San Diego up through about San Francisco, that looks like a real mess. Particularly San Francisco. I was there on my honeymoon. We started out in San Francisco, went down to San Diego, came up, and well, let's see, how do we do it? We did a bunch of stuff around that general area. It was generally the coast. Discovered that we spent only a day or two in San Diego and about 3 days in Los Angeles area, and discovered that we probably should have spent like maybe a day or two in Los Angeles and 3 or so days down in San Diego, because we were living in Chicagoland at the time, and Chicagoland is like a lot of big cities. You have this area down by the lakefront that's all filled with businesses and tall buildings. They call it the Loop because of how the elevated train goes around this very, very business and high upper class area. And then, you got the city as it moves out to the west, becomes more residential and stuff like that. And we got to Los Angeles, and at least at that time, which would have been, I think, 1991. There really wasn't anything like that. We could go see a lot of cool sights. We went to like Venice Beach. Here's an interesting story. It was a Sunday. We decided to go to the Walk of Stars and just wander around up there. Well, it's Hollywood and Vine. Yeah, Hollywood and Vine. We park our car. We go and turn the corner. And the very first thing that happens is a guy with a mohawk comes up to us. And this was a time when I thought mohawks were dead. Guy walks up, has a hand on the side of his face, and he turns to us and he says, "Excuse me, I have my hand stuck to the side of my face. Do you have any acetone so I can get it off?" And we're like, no, sorry, in turn. And about 15 minutes later, Hollywood and Vine area, hooker comes up to us and propositions me, and I'm like, I'm here in my honeymoon with my wife. And she says, "Hey, babe, that's no problem." Which for somebody who, grew up in the upper Great Plains is like, okay, well, that's bizarre. It's when I lived in Chicago, I get, okay, but I get it. But it was still funny as hell. The very first two things that happened with that. Super Cruise 63 says, "I agree, but unfortunately for me, I live the halfway point between San Diego and San Francisco, basically on the point." Yeah, I hear you. I don't know what you do about that. I get that, there are people that, you wouldn't necessarily, that, disagree with what seems to be the general problem out there. But I don't know what you do with it, I just don't know what you do with it. The Western Seaboard really seems to have turned into a dumpster. I don't even want to go back to San Francisco. I have some really fond memories of San Francisco. It was a great city in 1991. Lots of stuff to see. The seafood was to die for. Chinatown, all of these places. But now I see pictures of it, and it's just like homeless everywhere, and crap in the streets, and hypodermic needles and all of that. And it's just like, I don't want to go there. It would ruin some really fond memories I have of the place. So, again, I don't know for sure what you do, but it seems to me like maybe it's time to just say, okay, there's a big disconnect between the Western Seaboard and the rest of that state. It's same thing's happening in Illinois, which I'm a little bit more familiar with. Illinois, Chicago has not yet turned into the sort of thing that I at least see the pictures of and the video of like San Francisco or Los Angeles. But because of Chicago, it is a race between California and Illinois to see which one goes broke first. And they have the same disconnect. Chicagoland is one thing, and the entire rest of the state is a wholly different thing. And I'm not sure that it isn't time to break the state into two states. Maybe northern and maybe, I'm not sure what you'd call it. I like the notion of having a state called Jefferson because that's my favorite politician. The guy who, if he'd had his way, the ownership of the land that I live on right now would have been recognized as owned by Native Americans. There would have been, under Jefferson, if he's had his way, there would have been no genocide of Native Americans. Any settlers that came out here would have had to then trade with the natives for either to purchase or to use their land if Jefferson had had his way. I think Jefferson is one of the greatest politicians ever. He is my favorite politician ever. Unfortunately, we didn't get that. We got a genocide. And the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation in South Dakota is consistently rated the #1 slum in America. These people were pushed off into an area where they couldn't survive, and it is a huge slum. It is like a third world country if you go there. It's terrible. And nobody knows about it because the number of people that are out there is very small. Hell, what the hell? I have a picture. Let me see, which one is it? Oh, yeah. I've shown this before. This is my slideshow of the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation and the poverty that you will see on it. It is terrifying. I think this is a slideshow. Let me see. Yeah, it should be a slideshow. Is that a single image? I'm sorry, I'm looking at my... No, it's not. I wonder what the other one is. Well, I don't know if this is a Pine Ridge slideshow or not. This is a single image. But this sort of thing is common in the Pine Ridge. It's terrible. It's horrifying. And you have a lot of alcoholism in there because these people have no hope whatsoever. They are a conquered people and have never had any hope for over 100 years. They have no hope of their life circumstances ever improving and probably never will. And I killed my background, too. Isn't that fun? Let me go back to this background. Proxenoid, did you discuss yet why Twitter booted you? Did you say a man can't become biological woman without Federation gender swap transporter technology again? Wait, 63 is also saying, I'm waiting for the big quake that makes all of San Francisco fall into the ocean. Yeah, if only that were true. Unfortunately, it just means that those two plates are going to slide suddenly. One of them's going to suddenly slide north and to kill a crap ton of people. I hope that never happens, but makes San Francisco fall into the ocean. Proxmoid asks, did you discuss why Twitter booted you? I don't know why Twitter booted me. I haven't the slightest clue. When they killed my... I guess maybe I haven't mentioned it. They killed my second account. They killed the first one, and then just a few days ago, they killed the second one. I have no idea. I have a suspicion about the first one. Social media for me, in particular Twitter, is a marketing platform for me. And when I was using my first one, SYL Ranch, I was pushing my videos very heavily. The same ad copy over and over again on various people's different tweets, anywhere that it looked like it might be relevant. I never put anything out there that isn't relevant. You know, when I'm doing politics, I only put it out to those groups and those people who is relevant. But I was doing it a lot. They never told me why they killed it, but it may have been that. I really don't know. But then I had a new account at SYL Tales, and they killed that in like a week and a half, and I have no idea why. That one I have no clue, the slightest clue about. The only thing I can think of is I was having a conversation with somebody. What was it about? I don't remember. Some extremely left-wing guy. And he may have sent like a bogus, complaint against my account. I don't know, because I was being a lot more careful with that account. I was really only tweeting out my own and hoping that I grew an audience, grew followers so that I could, it would be self-sustaining after a while. If they kill this one, if they don't, I've asked for it to be reviewed. I don't know that I'll get it back. My guess is I probably won't get the second one back either. If that happens, I think I'm just going to abandon it completely and ask people to make accounts on Parler.com, Parler.com. I have an account there that is like most of my accounts, SYL Ranch. If you want to make an account at parlay.com and follow me there, feel free. But as to why they killed the second account, again, the first one I can maybe theorize a little bit. The second one is I'm total loss. I have no idea why they did it. I haven't the slightest clue. But biological woman stuff, yeah. Oh man, it's something I generally don't get into just because it's one of those things that is real controversial. Say, have a second. I got to go blow my nose. I'm going to put my emergency trailer on for a moment here while I go do that, so I'm not sitting here rubbing my nose constantly. So I will be right back.
Good evening, folks, and a hearty welcome to our drive-in theater. We have a wonderful evening's entertainment lined up for you, one that will provide several hours of pleasurable relaxation and diversion for you and your family. Did you fail to dress up for tonight's show? No tie, an old shirt and slacks, a house dress? Well, don't give it a thought. We're glad you came as you are. We just want you to enjoy yourselves. Don't forget to visit our refreshment center during the intermission or any time. You love the tasty array of snacks we have to offer. So will the youngsters. Everything is quality and so good. We hope you'll make this a weekly visit. Bring the family. Bring your friends. There are always wonderful new pictures to see, delightful snacks to nibble, a gay, pleasant evening for all. Oh, a word of caution. Don't drive over 10 miles an hour in the theater area for your safety's sake. And Mom or Pop, go with the kids when they leave the car. We hope you have a wonderful time. Come back soon.
Show starts in 4 minutes.
To visit our snack bar and treat yourself to some delicious Castleberry's pit-cooked barbecue sandwiches. Cook the Castleberry way, slowly over open pits of glowing charcoal, then seasoned with a sauce that's zesty, yet delightfully mild to please the entire family. Also at the snack bar, you'll find popcorn and soft drinks and candy and French fries to go with your Castleberry's barbecue sandwiches. There's plenty of time before the movie starts, so visit our snack bar right now for Castleberry's pit-cooked barbecue sandwiches.
So, anybody get suddenly hungry if you're in Colorado? Where I assume a lot of you are lighting up. Did anybody get the munchies after watching that? Who knows? So, but in terms of what you were talking about, Proxoin, man, my feelings on that are real politically incorrect. I think that there are only two genders. It's simple biology. You either have an XX chromosome, you have an XY chromosome, and that's all. I have no problem if you want to cross-dress, and for that matter, even if you want me to call you female if you're male or vice versa. I really don't have a problem with that. But by the same token, I don't think you can overlook science. For me, science trumps all. And scientifically, there is nothing about that makes sense. And in point of fact, my understanding is, correct me if I'm wrong, somebody, but my understanding is that if you're, say, a man who has undergone a sex change operation to a woman, you need to continuously, how do I put this in a gentle way, continuously have additional surgeries so that things don't attempt to heal over. Yeah. I also think that there's a good chance that a lot of people who feel like they're, a man trapped in a woman's body or vice versa, have something that used to simply be called in terms of psychology gender dysphoria. Jesse Milestone, for example, one of my favorite YouTubers, always has been. I think it was Jessie Milestone who mentioned on one of her shows one time that when she was much younger, a small child, she spent as a tomboy, she spent, I don't know, a year or so mostly dressing like a guy when she was young, but that didn't make her a guy. It didn't even make her a cross-dresser. It just meant that she went through a period in her life where that's what she wanted to wear. I think a lot of children are like that, and I particularly get really, really upset when parents are supporting or forcing their children just because they may be going through a phase where they're, getting into other clothes to say, oh, look, my kid is transgender. Isn't that freaking awesome? I totally support my transgender kid. Let's get this boy an operation. That's insanity. I've had 2 children. I know that they go through phases with the wind. If you pay too much attention to one phase or another, the only thing that I can say that one of my kids had a phase that continues to this day. She's in the video game industry, has always, from a very young age, wanted to be an artist. That was her goal since forever. And now she is. In terms of what she does in the video gaming industry, it's not writing anything. Well, some of it is. She's under a lot of NDAs. She can't even talk about what she does a lot of the time. We had dinner this evening, and I'm like, so, anything you can tell me? No, I'm under an NDA. And, of course, I've had so many NDAs. I'm like, okay. But that's the only time with my kids. That's really about the only time I can remember where, you saw something, you went, oh, she wants to be an artist. Okay, 5 minutes later, she's going to change her mind. Nah, she kept that one and is today, as a very adult, still doing it. But most of the time, your kids go through phases so much that if as a parent, you pay the slightest bit of attention to it, other than just say, oh, yeah, kid's going through a phase where they want to be this or do that or something like that. And so for parents to, be so foolish as to take what may simply be a phase, where they, oh, look, I found out I like this thing for, 15 minutes. And say, oh, okay, this is permanent. We're going to make this permanent forever. We're going to take this and make this choice permanent for you forever. Oh, man, that's just terrible parenting. I call that abuse. I call that child abuse, really. As an adult, it's an entirely different thing, although, the suicide rate among transgender people is really high. Now, there's some people who would say, well, it's because nobody accepts them. And I'm like, no, if you're transgender, if you actually have had, if you're actually transgender, don't care. I don't care. I'm 55 years old. I don't care. I really don't care. I will treat you with respect regardless. And it's hard for me to imagine that generations younger than I have somehow reversed on this attitude. So I don't think it's because they're not accepted. And I'm in the frickin' Upper Great Plains, right? A generally conservative place. And I don't know anybody who would do that. We treat each other as individuals. And if you're going to be transgender, okay, whatever. I don't even think my parents or grandparents, grandparents' generation would have probably thought it was weird. But I don't know anybody who thinks that way. So the suicide rate is incredibly high. And one has to wonder if that isn't because the original diagnosis of gender dysphoria wasn't a problem. It wasn't that. If they could get psychological help, maybe they wouldn't be so inclined to commit suicide. Maybe gender dysphoria is a real thing. Maybe it really is. Maybe it should be put back in the DSM, the manual that psychologists and psychiatrists use to diagnose things. Maybe it should be put back in. I don't know. But anyhow, just dipping off into politics briefly, I guess. I don't want to dwell on it too much. Again, transgender out there, hey, have yourself a fun old time tonight. If you're in Colorado right now, hey, smoke up on my behalf and make sure you got plenty of munchies and a designated driver. If you're not in Colorado, drink to your heart's content. Don't do it to the point where you get alcohol poisoning, and have a designated driver. This is supposed to be a fun night. Superhero63 says, when I was in the hospital, they asked me about 30 questions on what sex I was and how I was to be addressed. Kind of pissed me off. Yeah, I don't know if you've seen it. There's some democratic socialism, read communism, party meeting where it's, you can find it on YouTube. It's just so utterly laughable because they're like constantly saying which pronouns they use. Somebody will go up to a podium and announce themselves. Hi, I'm Bill Stone. I'm he, her, I'm he, him. And then, one guy gets up and tears into the fact that they're clapping, when the speakers are going, no, you got to go like this because people get triggered by clapping. And I'm like, you get triggered by clapping? Have you been like on some, I'm sorry. I had a lot of veteran students when I taught at the place that shall not be named. And those veteran students had real PTSD. Those guys had real problems. When they got triggered, And it wasn't from something like clapping your hands. It was from other things that were more associated with warfare. If you have not been in warfare, you're not getting triggered. You're just a schmuck. So, yeah, I know this whole thing about, I don't know how it is here right now. I don't know how it is here. I haven't had to change a doctor in quite some time. I'm going to have to in February because of how my financial situation is. So I'm going to have to change my doctors in February. I don't know what sort of stupid questions they're going to ask me. I hope it isn't 30 questions and stuff like that about that sex you were and how you want to be addressed. I hope that doesn't happen. I'm afraid that they're going to ask me about my gun ownership because I think that's something they have to do now. At which point I will probably say I'm not answering that question. Forget it. I'm not going to answer that question. There's no reason for anybody to know whether I have guns and what they are or anything like that. That's under the Second Amendment. That's my right. And I can tell you or not at my own discretion. But I do think that the gender thing is an issue. It's particularly an issue when you get into bathrooms, particularly when you get into bathrooms with like younger children, right, at school. I was reading recently about a guy who was a liberal who got really rather upset because unilaterally, without informing the parents or anything, they changed all of the bathrooms to be gender neutral. Anybody could use any kind of bathroom they wanted. Well, something I wasn't surprised about, it was because I think it was a grade school. Well, something I was certainly not surprised about, the boys, being schmucks, as boys often are when they're young, would go around kicking in the stalls when the girls were in them. And also, and I totally get this, the boys had a hard time using the urinals with the girls around. I get that. I would have a hard time using a urinal if there's women putting on makeup at the thing behind me or whatever. And again, I was a kid. I know how kids can be pretty damn cruel if they want to be. So that didn't surprise me at all. And I think that's a very bad policy, a really bad policy. And again, taking children, non-adults, who by definition at this point can't even smoke until they're 21. If they can't smoke until they're 21, how the hell can they make a decision about what gender they are? If they're young. That's just stupid. How about the church shooting last Sunday? Yeah, there's something I'm probably going to do an actual script about sometime this week. If you don't know, there was a church shooting in Texas that was stopped within moments by armed parishioners. That's the way it is. That is why one of the many reasons we have a Second Amendment. If those poor people in various synagogues now, if they had armed members, there would be a lot of people who are still alive today that are dead. or injured. The reality is, and the reason I'm probably going to do a video on it is because most people don't know the statistics behind how many times that guns are used in defense, and that they work, that they defensively work. You take out the bad guys in very short order. All we ever hear about, all the press ever points the cameras at, are the big, nasty, horrible things where, somebody's shot up a bunch of people and it's tragic and awful. But what they don't tell you is about, that Texas thing was, it was news for about 5 minutes. And they're not talking about it anymore. It doesn't fit the propaganda. So there's a video in the very near future where I'm going to sit down and break down the numbers, because the number of times that guns are used defensively is fantastic. It's an enormous number, much larger than anybody thinks. So I'm probably going to do a video of that. But that church shooting in Texas, that is exactly what those of us who support the Second Amendment want to see. We want to see people with guns who, when some nut job comes in and starts trying to shoot up the place, somebody gets a bead on them and takes them out as quickly as humanly possible. I think that those people are the guy. I think there's at least one person who's responsible, and I think he's a hero. I think he's an outright damned hero. And if he isn't treated as such by the entire country, it is a crying shame. It's just a shame. Let's see, I'm about 9 minutes away from midnight my time, so yeehaw for that. So, and I do always tend to remind people, a couple of pounds of lead and steel will equalize a 110-pound woman from a 250-pound would-be rapist. That is a reality. If and having lived in Chicagoland, as an IT guy, you never get any sleep. You just never get any sleep. It's one of the things being retired now. I'm like, oh God, I can sleep through the night, But you never get any sleep. You're constantly being paged in the middle of the night. I used to find myself down in the Chicago Loop at 2 a.m. That is not a good place to be at 2 a.m. It's not the worst place. You don't want to be in the south side of Chicago at 2 a.m. But the Loop ain't a great place to be at 2 a.m. So regardless whatever his honor the mayor wanted me to do, I went armed down there because it's just inadvisable to do otherwise, especially Chicago. God, I was so close to a drive-by shooting, a gangland drive-by shooting, that I actually heard the bullet ricochet off the pavement. Where Los Angeles, I don't know how, I guess I don't know for sure how Los Angeles compares in terms of crime and stuff. I'm more familiar with Chicago and just how bad it is. Every weekend, like right now, in 8 minutes, 7 minutes, there's going to be a big, celebration someplace in Chicago, and some of the gangs are going to use it as an excuse, because the cops are otherwise busy, to settle a bunch of scores. You will come back after this, and you are going to hear about crap tons of gangland scores that have been settled with deaths. By the way, that's the other thing, that calling this year the worst on record for mass shootings. A mass shooting is defined as, I believe, it's either 3 or 4 individuals involved. Okay, that describes 90% at least of the gangland killings in Chicago. At least. You get a drive-by with, 2 guys in a car shooting up, 4 other gang members. Okay, that's a mass shooting. It's not the same as when somebody goes into a synagogue and starts spraying the place with bullets. It's not even comparable. It's terrible that it happens. It's tragic, don't get me wrong. But when you hear mass shooting, you think of, those big horrible things that we think about. But if you take out all of the ones that are just gangland killings that are going to happen whether you like it or not, the only way to stop gangland killings is essentially to decriminalize drugs. That will stop it. The same way as decriminalizing alcohol after prohibition pretty much put an end to the gangland killings that you saw as a result of that. You're seeing turf wars. Get rid of the reason for having a turf, and you're not going to see it. But as long as we keep that around, you're going to see all of these gangland killings, and they're going to qualify as mass shootings because of the number of people involved. It's a very small number of people that are required to qualify as a mass shooting. So you have to look at the statistics and say, okay, all right, cut out all of the gangland killings in all of the major metro areas that we've got. What are you actually left with? And the number is very small. And then when you compare it against the number of people whose lives are saved by being able to carry a gun and defend themselves from attackers, you get a number that's actually a lot larger. So I'm gonna script out a video for that in the very near future. I just haven't gotten to it. It's, what day is it, man? I sometimes I lose track. It's Tuesday. Part of my general thing, and I know it hurts my show, the politics side of it. I know it hurts the show because when something like that happens, if you want more viewers, you have to strike while the iron is hot. But I don't do that. I let a day or two go by because I don't think that it's ethical to be, profiting off of something where you have victims' families or victims themselves, particularly people who've been killed. I don't think it's even ethical to start using them as some kind of political thing, political football, when the bodies aren't even cold. I mean, I think that's horrible. So it may hurt my show a bit, but I can't. It's just my general thing. I won't immediately do a video. I will leave a little time so that, the victims have at least some time to start to come to terms with what's happened. It's, if I just look at it, if it was me, and somebody that I loved was, killed, and then all of a sudden all these politicians are using this as an excuse to talk about it, and every pundit on TV and on YouTube was using it as an excuse to get views and ratings and stuff like that. I mean, I would be mollified. It would be horrifying. So I let some time go by, but I will be doing something Proxenoid within the next, probably, I don't know if I'll do it tomorrow on the 1st, but within the next 24 to 48 hours, I'll have a real video about it. Well, it looks like we're coming up on 2 minutes until midnight here in the upper Great Plains of the United States, or for that matter, Canada, and on up into chunks of the Arctic, or farther south for that matter. I wouldn't want to be in the Arctic right now, that's for sure. We had a huge blizzard. My sister and her family came up from Colorado Springs to Lincoln, Nebraska, a distance of about 10 miles. 10 hours. And on the way back, they ran into a gigantic blizzard, which is not at all unusual. It shut down Interstate 80, which is the interstate highway that runs all the way across, east-west across Nebraska. Shut it down for a while. It was that bad. And the 10-hour drive took them 20 hours because of that. So I don't think I'd want to be in the Arctic just this moment. Weird thing about it was, while the interstate highway was shut down west of us, we didn't see a single snowflake. Christmas here was snow-free. Not unusual. It was cold. It was cold as hell. But the Christmas here was snow-free. A lot of times we get 2 feet of snow. Some years we get very little. Some years we get almost nothing, like today. And give it a week. My dad always used to say that when he retired, he was going to get a house somewhere nice and temperate, but keep his home in Lincoln, Nebraska, so that he could come back for 1 week in August and 1 week in January to remember what he left behind. The weather here is just extremely, extremely variable. I don't know what the weather's like now. My kids are making that same trip back. My one daughter lives in Denver, and the other one lives in Colorado Springs as well. Okay, getting close. We are now at 10 seconds to midnight. 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and it is midnight. 2020, January 1st, 2020, in this part of the country. Again, wish I could show you some of the fireworks that must be going off right now, but I can't because it'll kill my stream. But happy New Year to all of those in my part of the country and anywhere in Central Time Zone, in South Dakota, in Kansas, all the way down to Texas, in parts of Canada. So, Happy New Year. Thank you, Proxnoid. And Super Cruise 63, thank you. You see a lot of snowflakes there every day. Well, not that kind of snowflake. Although we have our snowflakes as well. But yes, it is now New Year's Eve, so it is midnight. It is January 1st, 2020. So I will have a drink of one of the few things that I can only drink. Actually, a big one. It's odd. I can hear my mom moving around. She's usually asleep by now. So yes, Happy New Year, and Happy New Year to everybody on the East Coast who's had an hour to get good and hammered, and looking forward to the people in Colorado who will no doubt get good and high. Just make sure you have a designated driver, and if you're getting drunk, don't get too belligerent, and if you're getting high, don't make sure you got lots of munchies. So again, Happy New Year. I am not going to be able to stay around much longer because my back is killing me already. So I'm probably going to let it go for the evening here at midnight. Don't have anything to really show other than to say if you were out on my grandparents' ranch and could brave the 2 feet of snow or so that they have out there, what you see behind me is what you would see. An extraordinary sky with a lot of stars and very, very quiet. One of the few. It's interesting when I go out there. You go out there, you spend a few days. I'm in a position where I may be able to spend as much as a week out there now. You spend a few days out there, and you drive back into civilization, and it is like you have traveled backwards in time because of how little there is out there. It's not developed. It's just livestock and feed grains and hay and things like that. And then you drive back into even Wall, South Dakota, and it's almost like culture shock. So, Happy New Year. It is 2 minutes past 12. My back is about to give out. Thank you, everyone. Super Cruise 63, Proxnoid, and had another viewer, Larry, of course. Philos. Can't quite read this. Yes, Philosopher. Okay, got it, Philosopher. Thank you very much for watching. Thank you very much, Proxnoid and Super Cruise 63, and you take care as well. And that will be all the time that we have today for this episode of the highly acclaimed, world-renowned Tales from SYL Ranch, where everyone is entitled to my opinion. And I'm Bill Stone.
Ultimate power in this world has always been one simple thing: the control and manipulation of minds.